Sometimes you just want a calm, casual night home by yourself. You turn out the lights, heat up some popcorn, and start browsing to pick out the perfect scary movie that will enhance the atmosphere of the night. You start to think, what is my favorite scary movie? Is it Halloween, where the man in the white mask stalks the babysitters? Maybe it's Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th that you've seen 20 times and certainly must know who the killer is in it, right? But forget all that, because the phone is ringing, and it's very important that you answer it. You don't know who's on the other end, but what you soon will know is that this is the last phone call of your miserable life. The caller knows who you are, where you're standing in your own home, and might not be alone. Taking pleasure in the verbal torment and psychologically breaking you down before the ultimate reveal of the Halloween costume-wearing psycho that is ready and willing to gut you like a fish. GHOSTFACE is here, and no matter who is under the mask or how many horror movie rules that you've learned to follow over the years, only one thing is for sure, that you won't be right back.
I'll be right back!
Joining the ranks of the most iconic slashers of all time, Ghostface from the Scream franchise has terrorized audiences for nearly 30 years. And the combination of suspense, horrific kills, recurring characters, and the murder mystery aspect of it all, getting into those third act reveals, along with providing some meta commentary on the genre itself, has kept this series alive and well, and unlike many others, has never had a remake, and arguably to many fans, has never had an actually outright bad movie in its entire run. How is any of this possible? Well, we're gonna find out. Join me as we descend into Woodsboro and beyond as I dissect, discuss, and traverse the entire Scream franchise. It's taken me a while to get around to it, but it's time that I finally tackle one of the big final slasher series on this channel that I haven't. I appreciate your patience getting around to Scream, and without further delay, go answer your goddamn phone.
Not scared, are you? Scream.
Now, I don't think I need to give any backstory on the origin to the slasher genre in general once again, but if anybody happens to be uninitiated, a slasher film is essentially a subgenre of horror that usually depicts a group of people getting killed off one by one, specifically by some kind of defined killer. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Child's Play, they're all slasher movies. It gained momentum in the 1970s, but by the 1980s, this subgenre boomed and was in the forefront of horror. In many ways, this was great. The franchise flourished, there were all kinds of sequels being made, and everybody was trying to come up with the next iconic killer. Leatherface, Candyman, even Leprechaun. Yeah, I already talked about Leprechaun enough. But the point is, the slasher genre became so popular and so mainstream that it had reached the top of its roller coaster track by the 1990s, and then was beginning to fall. Not in terms of quantity, but in quality. Some horror franchises were already reaching past their prime and putting out some pretty weird or wacky sequels just to keep pumping them out. They turned Freddy Krueger into a cartoon character, basically. Jason went to Manhattan, kind of. Leprechaun went up into space. That one's actually pretty good. And Matthew McConaughey was in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Get that bitch! Yeah!
Basically, things were getting weird. On the opposing side of that, there was also a rise of the more psychological, grounded horror films. Things like Misery and Silence of the Lambs were now taking everybody's attention away from the slasher films. And by 1996, the slasher genre was played out, and people weren't as enthusiastic about it anymore because, well, they'd seen it too many times. They knew the rules of these movies, and it became too cliche.
What rules? You don't... Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
So you would think that by the time Scream was released, it would just fall to the wayside, becoming another forgotten piece of horror history that blended in with the others. But you would be totally wrong. Instead, Scream was like this dose of heroin injected straight into the veins of the slasher genre, completely revitalizing it and redefining it for decades to come. Also, please don't do heroin. That was just an analogy. Drugs are bad. But how was Scream able to accomplish this at a time where this type of movie was being more and more dismissed by the general public? Well, there's many reasons, but let's start with this. My horror hero, Wes Craven. Somebody that didn't even grow up watching horror movies and lived in a heavily sheltered religious household. He was never allowed to watch them, and so he didn't grow up being a fan. He went to college for writing, English, and psychology, and even taught classes on the subjects, which I always believed probably helped him when he was writing characters in horror movies that were psychopaths, because he got into their headspace and truly tried to understand the minds of how these people worked. His work in film began with just some behind-the-scenes editing. He became an assistant to Sean Cunningham, who famously would go on to direct the original Friday the 13th, which is even funnier because Wes Craven created Nightmare on Elm Street, and eventually both their characters would meet in a versus battle 20 years later. Of course, the original Jason in the first movie was just a drowned boy and not the hockey mask-wearing maniac that we all know and love, but that's besides the point. But it's also known that before either of them caught a break in the business, they did do some directing and editing on various graphic films under different pseudonyms, but if you look hard enough on the internet, they're out there. You can find them. But everything changed when Sean Cunningham and Wes Craven got some funding to make a horror movie, which is what the financial backers wanted. Sean produced it, and he asked Wes Craven if he would like to write and direct. And Wes Craven, the guy who had never even seen, watched, or cared about horror before this, when he was asked to write a horror movie, this is what he comes up with. The Last House on the Left. A gritty, disgusting movie about a group of 4 murderers that abduct 2 girls, rape, torture, and execute them, and then stumble upon one of the girls' parents' house where the parents get revenge by murdering the killers in an equally barbaric way, including using a chainsaw, and one of them gets their dick bitten off. Insane. Last House on the Left falls into that revenge horror genre like I Spit on Your Grave, but what's always been fascinating to me is that this is what Wes came up with as a horror movie just from his own mind, and well, it certainly is horrific. Maybe it's not up to par with today's standards of horror, and it's probably not as shocking as it was back when it came out in the 70s, but I still find it to be a disturbing movie and tough to watch at times. It's about the subject matter, and I guess Wes decided to go with real horror, something that could actually happen. I also want to correct a mistake that I made on my Nightmare on Elm Street retrospective video where I said that Krug, the main killer in the movie, convinces his younger brother to off himself. I misspoke. This is not his brother, it's his son. So sorry about that. That also makes the scene way more disturbing in a different way, and it also sucks when you make a mistake in a long YouTube video because there's no way to go back and change it, minus deleting the entire video and then re-uploading. I've been wanting to clarify this mistake for 2 years now, and this is my first opportunity to, so yeah, sorry, I got that wrong. Anyway, the film was obviously extremely controversial for the time in 1972, and it had to be re-edited several times in attempts to get an R rating, and was even banned in certain areas of the world like the UK and Australia. But because the movie was so shocking and twisted for the time, it got Wes Craven noticed, and it jump-started his career. To make a long story short, Wes had now become known as the horror guy, and despite trying to get other types of movies made, the financial backers wanted more horror. So he came up with The Hills Have Eyes, a story about a family getting stranded in the desert and attacked by a different family of cannibals living within the hills. I like this film a lot, and it is certainly dated. A lot of people prefer the remake, but I do love the classic 70s style of filmmaking that's presented in the original. I won't go through the rest of his entire filmography, which has some hits and misses, and Swamp Thing, but what I need to talk about as a stepping stone to Scream is, of course, A Nightmare on Elm Street.
But he's burned and uses these knives.
Just another nightmare.
Released in 1984, Wes Craven was fascinated by a story of refugees having vivid nightmares of something coming after them, and some even reported of actually dying in their sleep. A terrifying thought, but a brilliant idea for a horror movie. Of an entity that comes to you in your dreams, preying on your fears and insecurities, and if you die in a dream, you die for real. Thus, Freddy Krueger was born, the child murderer who was burned alive by the parents of Springwood, only to come back from the dead in the form of some kind of dream demon, haunting the nightmares of the Elm Street children and using his signature razor glove that he made himself. Nightmare on Elm Street is a masterpiece of the genre, a crowning achievement for Wes Craven, and for an entire generation of people, scared them to the point where they couldn't fall asleep. There were pros and cons to Nightmare on Elm Street's success, though, one of which is that Wes had to change the ending to be more open-ended for potential sequels. This wasn't his intent, and he wanted to have a more definitive ending of Nancy overcoming her fear and defeating Freddy. But at that stage in his career, he kinda had to listen to the studio on this one and give it a different ending. And thus, a franchise was born out of it. And though Wes did have some involvement here and there, like writing the initial story draft for Part 3, the series took on a life of its own without him. Going in many different directions than the original that was made to be a pure horror film that kept Freddy mostly in the background, barely ever getting a clear look at him. But by Nightmare on Elm Street 5 and 6, Freddy was the main character. He was cracking jokes all the time, and there was more and more comedy being injected into each and every film. Wes Craven did not truly return to the franchise until a decade later in 1993, making a movie called New Nightmare. And this movie is the precursor to Scream in almost every way. New Nightmare is not a traditional sequel. In fact, it throws tradition out the goddamn window. And although it's good to have knowledge of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, especially the original, this is technically a standalone film, one that is set in our real world where all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are in fact movies. Heather Langenkamp, who plays Nancy in Nightmare 1 and 3, plays herself here. She plays Heather. The same thing with Robert Englund, John Saxon, and even Wes Craven himself. As much as Scream is a meta-commentary on horror films and slashers in general, New Nightmare, which came out 3 years prior, is all of those things as well, but more specifically for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. There's also a novelty I love with movies that are about making movies, which New Nightmare is. In the film, they are making a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and there's lots of commentary coming from the creator of the original itself about everything that had happened with the franchise over the last 10 years, both positive and negative. And then, real murders start to happen. There is a real Freddy Krueger, but it's actually some kind of demonic entity that over various different times in human history takes on different forms, and it happens to be whatever the current collective idea of evil is. Since Freddy Krueger is so popular, the demon takes on the identity of Freddy. And there's lots of references to previous forms that it had, one in particular being the witch from Hansel and Gretel. And there's something in the lore also about the entity coming forth as the stories begin to stop. Kind of like if we don't have an outlet for the evil to exist within fiction, it then becomes real. And to put it away, we have to keep telling the story. It's kind of like a commentary on why people like horror movies to begin with, the reasons why people love them. They're an outlet for us to experience darkness in a safe, controlled way, as well as giving us some kind of catharsis through making it to the end of the experience. It's a really cool concept, and one that may have not been appreciated enough at the time that it came out. I absolutely adore New Nightmare, and it's literally my second favorite Elm Street movie after the original, but with this outside perspective on the Elm Street series being kind of the core foundation of the movie, you can definitely look at this as the precursor to Scream. And without playing with the ideas here first in his own creation, Scream might not have appealed to Wes Craven in the same way. But even though Wes Craven directed the original Scream and most of the franchise, unlike Nightmare on Elm Street, he did not create the story. That credit, of course, goes to Kevin Williamson. Originally from North Carolina, Kevin went to school for theater and arts and eventually moved to New York City, finding himself doing small acting roles in music videos and on television series like In Living Color. As a screenwriter, he popped off in the late 90s and early 2000s with many things like I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, and for TV, he created the TV show Dawson's Creek, which was huge and inescapable at the time. I've never watched it, but I know a lot about it. But before all of those things existed, starting off with the best of them all, he wrote Scream, with the original screenplay being titled Scary Movie.
This is awesome!
And yeah, we'll get to Scary Movie later. It was an idea to have the characters in the movie be aware of the horror cliches and tropes. It would be a movie about horror movie fans, but there would also be a real-life event that served as inspiration for him to begin writing it. This would be something that happened in Gainesville, Florida in the year 1990. There was a man named Danny Rolling that murdered 5 college students over the course of 4 days, breaking into their apartments, tying them up, sexually assaulting them, and then stabbing them to death with a knife. Afterwards, he would arrange their bodies in specific displays for anybody that would find them. He got the title of the Gainesville Ripper and wouldn't be sentenced until 1994, with his eventual execution in 2006. Danny's real-life story doesn't have a lot to do with the premise or themes of Scream, but a recent true event happening to some tragic youths that didn't do anything to deserve the horrific way in which they met their end, combined with this idea of blending real-life horror with the knowledge of horror movies as inspiration, created a perfect storm for Kevin to want to write the movie Scream. According to Kevin, he wrote Scream in just a couple of days, basically out of desperation to try to sell and pay his bills, which is kind of funny how often I've heard that when researching these famous horror movies, that the people that made them just really needed some money. But even from the perspective of being a shitty YouTuber, I do understand the massive inspiration that being broke will give you in order to get content done. Eventually, Miramax purchased the script, and when looking for a director, Wes Craven was the prime candidate, though at first he was hesitant and not sure that he wanted to go back to this kind of film, but ultimately felt like his fans deserved something special, and he believed the script was so good it would be an attempt to get his career back on track, because even though I love New Nightmare, it did not perform well at the box office, and a lot of people didn't. Scream would give him a new vehicle to explore, and ironically would tackle similar ideas that he wrote in New Nightmare. Scream is also a unique entity because it can really only exist because of other horror movies. The point is that the characters have direct reference and understanding of the genre, and to do that, you need to be aware of horror movies to begin with. I'm sure if you've never watched a horror movie in your life and you watch Scream as your first one, you could still enjoy it. But it's a movie that you will get so much more out of if you already are a fan. It's not trying to say anything new by having a mass killer with a knife. Hell, there's even an entire sequence in Scream that is done while Halloween is playing on the TV in the background, and the Halloween score is the background music to the scene.
Mr. Prescott?
You can't get any more on the nose than that. But there's another component here too. As Michael Myers is a silent killer that never speaks, a signature of Scream is that before the killings, Ghostface calls his victims and torments them over the phone. What seems initially like a prank call will gradually get more serious and explicit, and we realize the caller is watching the victim at the same time. And although I would say Scream perfected this trope, this was also done plenty of times before. Black Christmas, a horror slasher from 1974, predating even Halloween, has multiple sequences of the killer calling and harassing the campus girls over the phone. And unlike Scream, these calls are way more sexually graphic, which makes it even more disturbing, at least in concept.
I'll stick my tongue up your pretty pussy.
You fucking creep!
And there's also the movie When a Stranger Calls from 1979. A babysitter gets an alarming phone call from a killer, with the big twist, of course, being that the calls were coming from inside of the house.
Sergeant Sacker, we've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house.
So when you take classic horror films and tropes like the likes of these movies, Halloween, and a variety of others, you add in Wes Craven's sensibilities for getting into the psychology of his characters, a real-world horror event that inspired the writing of it, and the decline of slashers in the mid-90s, you put it all in a blender, and you get a generational defining event with Scream.
Someone is playing a deadly game. Someone who's seen one too many scary movies.
But there's one more element that no slasher is complete without, and that's the killer himself, or herself. That brings us to Ghostface. Ghostface is very different from other horror slashers, and the main difference being Ghostface is not just one killer. I hope if you're watching this video, you're already a fan of this movie series, because to talk about these movies at all involves spoilers, not just with who is killed, but also who is doing the killing. A major selling point of the Scream franchise is that these movies are also mystery films, with Ghostface being more of a concept than a character. Because each movie, over the current 6 that are released as I create this video, feature entirely different killers with entirely different motives, but all carrying the same Ghostface banner. These movies more or less take place in a grounded real world. Ghostface is always a human being, there's nothing supernatural going on, and the whole film gives you clues and misdirections about who it might be until there's an ultimate reveal towards the finale of the movie. So this, of course, also makes these movies great for rewatches. The first time you watch it, you can guess and theorize which character you think the killer is, and the next time you watch it, you have that knowledge, and so there's more clues that are right there in your face that you missed the first time. And in movies where there's more than one killer, you can also try to figure out who was wearing the costume at what time, in what scene. Now, Scream also isn't the first slasher movie to have the killer be a mystery, but at the time of release of the original, there were so many clearly defined slasher characters that it was yet another breath of fresh air to add this extra element into the mix. The Ghostface costume is meant to be generic. It's something that anybody could buy from a Halloween store. Literally, the origin of all the Ghostface killers getting their costume is they just go buy one. But the costume itself has its own complicated history. In the early 90s, a special effects artist named Lauren Givens made what is considered to be the first iteration of the mask, part of this Ghostmaker product line that helped you make a costume out of your own bed sheets, but with an actual mask, so you didn't need to poke those classic holes into the sheets.
This is so corny. Is this what we've been reduced to, sheets?
Think of them as death shrouds, and the moaning is important. Really moan.
But then another company called Fun World tasked a designer named Bridget Linden to create a line of masks using these existing designs for her inspiration, giving way to Fun World's Fantastic Faces collection. And this one right here, called the Peanut-Eyed Ghost, would eventually become our definitive Ghostface mask. But that's when things get weird. It wasn't until location scouting for the movie that the crew stumbled upon this specific Fun World mask. And at the time, they had asked K&B Effects to design a mask for the movie that would be original, but none of these were looking like something that they wanted. When Wes saw this mask, he felt like it was the right choice, and it reminded him of the classic painting titled The Scream by Edvard Munch. A quick tangent, but the painter describes his work like this. I was walking along the road with 2 friends. The sun was setting. Suddenly the sky turned blood red. I paused, feeling exhausted, and leaned on the fence. There was blood and the tongues of fire above the blue-black fjord of the city. My friends walked on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature. That's kind of crazy. But the irony here is that this painting, although it is called The Scream, it has no direct inspiration for the masks or even for the movie title. This is just a fun coincidence. Anyway, one of the problems is that they didn't have enough time to acquire the rights to use the mask, so some scenes were filmed using a mask made to look extremely similar but just different enough that they didn't get sued, until the eventual deal was made and they could use the real Fun World mask, which has since been rebranded, specifically now as Ghostface. But the awkward part of this is that the Fun World line of masks was made from the original concepts of a different company, and the real original Ghostface came from Lauren Givens. Unless you ask Fun World as a company, that of course now claims that the design was always theirs and not inspired from Givens. To my knowledge, the original creators of the mask never took any legal action against Fun World, but they do request some credit for the work that they put in and the company that they originally built. Of course, none of this was really known by the filmmakers, especially at the time they were making the movie. They just needed a mask, they found a good one, and they paid the company that they found it from to use it. To this day, Fun World is still the distributor of the official Ghostface merchandise, after the movies adding the entire costume and hood since it was originally just a mask, and they have a countless amount of variations of it. They have different color Ghostface masks, they have the sexy version, the scarecrow version, some with devil horns, masks that bleed, glow-in-the-dark masks, they have the knives, and they even have a costume for your pug. Anyway, outside of the designs, describing Ghostface as a character is different with each individual movie, so I may as well wait till the full reviews to talk about them. For now, it's just the awareness that Ghostface is an ever-changing identity worn by at least 13 different characters over the course of 6 movies. And we're going to get into that now. But first, a quick recap of the timeline just to prepare for the rest of the upcoming video.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to everyone's favorite, or more likely least favorite segment of these videos, a little portion that I like to call the timeline board. The timeline board was created for 2 reasons. One, that I can give an overview of what we're going to be discussing and tackling in this video, talk about various timelines and tangent universes of different horror franchises. And the second reason is I have this big ass whiteboard and I really want to use it, and this is like the only time I get to. Here's a basic look at the Scream franchise that we're going to talk about, and as I've mentioned, and I'm going to mention dozens of times in this video, Scream is very much an outlier in the slasher world of films because it doesn't have a remake, number one, and it also doesn't have different tangent timelines like Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Nightmare on Elm Street that has the real world timeline of New Nightmare. We don't have to deal with remake timelines and alternate timelines and movies that are prequels or prequels to sequels or anything like that. Scream is so basic and simplistic, literally a caveman could follow it. We go from Scream to Scream 2, blows your mind. Scream 3, then there's a long gap of time in between movies, but when it came back not as a reboot, not as a remake, it came back as Scream 4. Then there was another huge gap of time, and we get probably the most frustrating to me, a movie just called Scream, which actually is Scream 5. But Scream, as it deals with the meta commentary of the movies that it's talking about and critiquing, well, a common trope is to just call the new movie the same title as the original. They did it with Halloween 2018, which serves as a sequel to the original Halloween, is just called Halloween. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 2022 version that's a sequel to the original Texas Chainsaw, ignoring all the others, is again just called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because we can't just throw numbers on things or subtitles on things. We have to make things as confusing as possible, so just call it the regular title. With Scream 5, they followed that trend, but since it's Scream, they get away with it while saying, you know, oh, it's just a commentary on the type of movies that we're parodying. I call it Scream 5. And then we have Scream 6. It's taken me a while to get around to doing the Scream franchise, and that's not for any particular reason. These videos take a long time to make, and there were other franchises I had ahead of it. Ones that were a little bit more near and dear to my heart, like Alien or Evil Dead, that I wanted to tackle, but I always wanted to get around to the other all-time great slasher icon, Ghostface. You literally can't go anywhere without recognizing this symbol of horror that has now been around for 30 years. Everybody knows Ghostface, everybody knows Scream, even if they've never seen the movies themselves. And that, to me, is always a testament of what makes a film, you know, more of an iconic piece of pop culture, more of something that fits within the hearts and minds, the zeitgeist of humanity, is if you can just recognize the entire franchise from a single image or a single word. And Scream has both. There was even another movie called Scream years prior that I'll talk about a little bit later, but everyone has since forgotten about that movie, as they should. It's a piece of shit. And all of us remember Scream from 1996. As well, Wes Craven is one of my all-time favorite directors, not just horror directors, but directors in general. And I talked about this in the introduction as well. And of course, the man gave us not just Nightmare on Elm Street, but also directed the original Scream, actually the first 4 Scream movies up until he sadly passed away, which is also a unique development for a horror slasher franchise. Usually they interchange directors, or maybe a director will stay around for 1 movie or 2 movies. We got 4 out of Wes Craven, so that is also something about the franchise that I deeply appreciate. Now, if you want to get super technical, there is also the TV series Scream, which would be in an alternate timeline, but I'm going to stay focused on the movies in this video, and I'll explain why later on in the vid, but I really just want to focus on the films themselves, and we're not going to be discussing the TV series, so if that is something you're looking forward to, I apologize in advance. We're going to be sticking to just the films in this video. We're going to be going in order for the most part, taking a few detours now and then, but I really don't have much else to introduce. Like I said, it's a solid timeline that just goes from Scream 1 to Scream 6. There's only 6 movies to cover, so not a lot to give in the timeline board introduction. So I figured, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. And quickly before I do, I just want to say, again, I'm so excited to talk about the original Scream because the opening sequence took everybody by surprise. It was this scene that introduced Casey Becker, played by Drew Barrymore, who was promoted to be one of the main characters of the film. She was on all of the posters and she was propped up to be a major part of the movie. So just like Psycho from way back when and other various films along the way, it took this idea where you could take the main character of the piece of media and then just kill them off immediately, which is something that nobody expected. So while we get into it, I'm gonna go make some popcorn and get ready for the first Scream. Hello?
Hello.
Who's this?
You tell me first.
Well, who are you trying to reach?
Maybe I want to talk to you.
Well, I can't really talk right now. I'm right in the middle of making one of my retrospective videos. It's gonna take me all day.
A retrospective video? I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
What's your favorite retrospective?
Favorite retrospective video? Well, probably the Evil Dead or the Nightmare on Elm Street one's really good. I really like the Friday the 13th one too. Pretty proud of that one.
Have you done Hellraiser yet?
No, nope, I haven't done that. That's not, yeah.
What about Scream?
Well, yes, actually, Scream is, hey, why do you sound familiar?
You should know why.
What do you mean by that?
We have a lot in common. We both like making popcorn.
Okay, alright, this is getting weird. Look, I am not interested in having this conversation anymore.
I think you are, Ginger Boy.
No, I'm not.
I just have a question.
Fine, what's your question?
Who is the killer in Friday the 13th?
Dude, that's easy. Mrs. Voorhees, Pamela Voorhees, the original killer of Friday the 13th. That's basic kindergarten questioning right there.
Okay, how about my next question? Who is the villain in Hellraiser?
That is a trick question, because you want me to say Pinhead, but the Cenobites are only one of the threats in the film, and they're sort of a neutral force. The real villain of the original Hellraiser is Frank.
Good. Now how about the villains in the other Hellraisers?
I really don't want to know who the other villains are.
I think you do.
No, I don't.
Okay, one final question then.
Okay.
What room of your house am I in? Is it your living room? The bathroom, maybe? Or am I in your office? Think carefully.
No, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. I'm not choosing any of them. Go screw yourself.
Nailing the opening scene of a movie can be very difficult. You have to draw the audience in and get them on board with whatever the upcoming premise may be and all of the drama that's about to take place that they will have to invest at least the next 90 minutes of their life to. There's plenty of films with fantastic opening sequences, but honest to God, Scream might have the greatest opening scene in any movie ever. And I'm not kidding. First of all, the whole thing works completely contained like a short film in and of itself. If you stopped watching as soon as Casey dies, it's like watching a mini-movie where the killer wins in the end. And from there, it sets the stage, not just for the original film, but every single Scream movie to come after it. The standard is they need to have a big opening kill sequence introducing the Ghostface of that movie. But none of the sequels have ever been able to capture the pure magic that is the opening of the original. There's also Drew Barrymore playing Casey. It might be hard to remember now, but at the time, Drew Barrymore was in all of the marketing and the posters for this movie, as if she were the main character, or at least one of them. She's even the person that does the iconic pose on the Scream poster that you would see used on merch and DVD Blu-ray covers for years to come. That's Drew Barrymore's face. Nobody was expecting her to die right in the opening scene and not actually be part of the movie's story. Sure, this isn't the first time that a horror movie subverted expectations by killing off its main character early. It was made famous by Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho back in the 60s, and Wes Craven has even done it before with Tina in A Nightmare on Elm Street. But unlike those movies, Casey doesn't even get a chance to shine before her death. She is completely overtaken by the killer right from the get-go. There's also no preparation for the audience. All you get is the title of the movie, and then bam, it cuts right to the phone ringing and Casey picking it up. The movie throws you right into insanity in the first 5 seconds, and it does not let up for the entire scene, having a steady and excellently paced progression of the entire sequence. The first phone call makes it seem like it's just somebody who dialed the wrong number, so she hangs up. But then the phone rings again, and again. All the while, we are following her around the house, noticing that she is completely alone with all of the empty rooms, and she starts to give into the novelty of this caller. She starts chatting with him, laughing, joking. Again, nothing too crazy yet. He's asking what she's up to, comments on the fact that she's making popcorn and preparing to watch a scary movie, and then he asks the ever-quoted tagline of the film.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Things slowly begin to shift as the caller says this.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Casey starts to get more cautious and frightened as we progress, and the caller gets more and more aggressive.
Listen, asshole!
No, you listen, you little bitch. You hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand?
Until ultimately, Casey is frantically running around the house, locking all of the doors, and trying to threaten the caller that she'll call the cops or that her boyfriend will beat them up. But the boyfriend has already been caught, tied and gagged outside on her patio, and the only way to potentially save him is for her to answer the caller's horror movie trivia questions, famously asking who was the killer in Friday the 13th. Casey confidently exclaiming that it's Jason Voorhees, who by 1996, when Scream came out, was absolutely the established brand of the Friday the 13th series, but of course, it was Mrs. Voorhees that was the original killer in the first movie. Casey's boyfriend is gutted, and after a brief chase scene, we see our killer plain as day in the Ghostface costume, chasing Casey down and killing her right before her parents get home. The moment of her mother picking up the phone line and hearing her dying breaths on the other end is an incredibly disturbing moment, and we end with them discovering her body hung up on the tree outside. An absolutely wild, chaotic, and blood-pumping opening to this horror movie, and one that will certainly stand the test of time. Also, I should mention that the Ghostface voice is done by a voice actor named Roger L. Jackson. In the film, the characters use a voice changer device that probably would not work as well in real life as it's portrayed in the film, but that voice, as far as in-universe goes, is just whatever is on that voice recorder. It's just one of the voices. But the Ghostface voice is another signature staple of the series, and without his work, these phone call scenes would not be the same. So Roger L. Jackson deserves a lot of credit for his contributions to the films that he might not get overall. Also, fun fact, he was also the voice of Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah.
Do not continue with your ramblings, for my ramblings are the ramblings to be obeyed. For I am the king, supreme leader, and all-around dictator. But I never planned for my plans to make plans to stop my plan. I plan to rule the planet, not to have my plans planned to stop me.
So I'll just run through our cast of characters here. Our real protagonist is Sydney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. She's a smart, resourceful girl whose mother had been murdered a year prior to the film's opening, and now she lives with her father and is dating a boy named Billy Loomis. You'll also notice a lot of references to Halloween and other horror movies in this film, Loomis, of course, being the name of Dr. Loomis from Halloween, which of course was also the name of a character from Psycho. But Billy Loomis is a guy who immediately feels like he's a little bit off, but he does have some great pickup lines.
The Exorcist was on. Got me thinking of you.
Her best friend is a girl named Tatum, who has an older brother in law enforcement named Dewey. Dewey has an awkward kind of nervous personality, but also displays a lot of bravery when needed. The other classmates are Randy, who's our resident movie nerd and probably the most relatable to me, for better or for worse. Then we have Stu, a character that we will probably end up talking a lot about as this video goes on. And Gale Weathers, a snooty reporter that will do anything she can for a provocative story. It all takes place in a fictional town called Woodsboro, California, where something like Casey's murder is throwing everybody for a loop, and there's a huge investigation as to who might have done it. And that is the whole who's the killer element of these films that it introduces. All these people that just give you a little bit of a reason to believe any of them could possibly be the killer. Stu is being very insensitive to Casey's death, and we even learn that he used to date her. Randy goes on about killers' methods and motives from all of his horror movie knowledge, and believe it or not, even Dewey seems a little bit suspicious in the first film at times. The next attack scene actually does feature Sydney with a similar setup to the opening, but this one can seem a little bit strange once you finish the film and figure out everything that's going on. So again, if you're watching this retrospective video, I assume that you've seen the movies before and that we're here to discuss them together, but spoiler alert, I guess. The other big twist of the movie is that there isn't just one killer, but two working together. That happen to be Billy and Stu. Their ultimate plan is to kill Sydney on the anniversary of her mother's death, so attacking Sydney early here has to be explained in some way, because she can't die yet. I don't know if the writer Kevin Williamson has ever commented on this scene, but my personal headcanon is that Billy wanted to stage it so that he could come in and be her savior after Ghostface attacks. He arrives right after when Sydney runs into her room, and he's there to comfort her. Now, obviously, it's because he was there making the phone calls, but to arrive like this immediately after, as if he's some kind of protector, probably to capitalize on her being vulnerable and get in her pants, which is also something he's trying to do the whole film, so it makes enough sense to me. But I have always wondered what would have happened if Stu got too carried away and killed her this early on, which it seems like he almost did. But when a cell phone falls out of Billy's pocket, Sydney is immediately suspicious of him, and he gets taken in for questioning. Also remember, this was 1996, so not everybody had a cell phone, and especially not at all times. For this time period, that was enough evidence to have him under suspicion for sure. But while Billy is in prison overnight, Ghostface calls again, throwing off Sydney and the audience, who at this time we all assume there's only one killer. But anyways, let's talk about Sydney's past for a bit. So, I said Sydney's mom was killed a year prior, but there's a little bit more to it than that, as Sydney struggles to acknowledge the fact that her mom was unloyal to her dad and slept around with other people. One of those people was Cotton Weary, who we only see video footage of in the first movie, but he was the one that was falsely accused of her mother's murder. Sydney fully believed that he was the culprit because Billy and Stu staged it to look that way. And the reporter, Gale Weathers, believes that Cotton is innocent and is even writing a book on it.
Oh, I'll look for it. I'll send you a copy.
And look, Gale is being played by Courtney Cox, who played a main character on the TV show Friends, which was a huge hit for some reason. But you know who else was on Friends? Jennifer Aniston, who starred in Leprechaun. But Courtney Cox is not only unashamed of being in a horror movie, she was in more of them. In fact, Gale Weathers is the only character that appears in every single Scream movie. Okay, sure, I guess Scream has way better public reception than Leprechaun ever did, but just making a Leprechaun video a few months ago and seeing how dismissive Jennifer Aniston was of that series, and now we have another Friends actress who fully embraces the horror genre and she's in the entire Scream series. I'm just glad we made it this far and found somebody famous that likes being in these movies. It's also interesting that in-universe, the Ghostface costume is actually called Father Death. What a weird name, Father Death. How do you get that out of this image? The other strange thing is that later in the film, Tatum says to the killer sarcastically,
No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
but I don't think that was meant to be in reference to the actual name of the costume. Now, remember, Tatum is not shown as one of the horror movie loving teens as a lot of the others are. And I believe her calling him Ghostface was just her making a snarky comment. But nevertheless, this moment is the first use of the term Ghostface in any of these movies, and that is the term that would go on to be the established name of the killer persona in both the film universe and in our real world, where the masks were rebranded as Ghostface. When it shifted in universe from Father Death to Ghostface, I couldn't tell you. There's one moment in this movie, though, that I don't like. There's a scene where Sydney and Tatum are talking, and afterwards it just zooms in on Ghostface lurking in the bushes. And I'm sorry, this moment is so silly to me. I always laugh. The fuck is he doing there? First of all, it's broad daylight, and he's in the full costume. Then, there's no killings or phone calls that happen in this scene. And also, they already know where Sydney is, so he's just spying on her in costume during the middle of the day. For what reason? In fact, I don't even know how they do all the chase scenes to begin with. Have you ever put on a Ghostface mask and actually tried to be really aware of your surroundings? You can't see shit in these masks. So if I was doing some kind of recon, I definitely would not be wearing the mask. But anyway, another fun moment is when the school principal, played by Henry Winkler, yes, the Fonz himself, is killed by Ghostface after hours in the school. Which at first seems like a random kill just added for more body count, but the principal's death is what causes all the kids at the party to leave because his body is displayed on the football field. Also, there's a great cameo by Wes Craven himself playing a janitor named Fred. A janitor named Fred wearing a red and green striped sweater. I see what you did there. There is another moment where Sydney is attacked in the bathroom at school, and it's debated on whether this was Billy or Stu, and once again, I would ask, why would they attack now? But earlier, it also shows some of the students that are buying and wearing the Father Death costume in order to be assholes and just genuinely obnoxious teenagers, so I was always under the assumption that this was just somebody in the school pulling a prank and wearing the costume. Because at this point, we're in Sidney's perspective, and I think we're meant to see all of these things being very traumatic. The point to me is just that Sydney can't escape this, and the killer is effectively anywhere and could be anyone. And she's also wrestling with the fact that she probably contributed to putting the wrong guy in prison for murdering her mom. The scene in the video store where Randy is working is also great. I really miss video stores, you guys. But also in hindsight, this scene makes it extremely obvious that Billy and Stu are the killers. But just the same, it's a fun scene and I enjoy it. I vividly remember when Scream came out and a friend of mine when we were in elementary school yelled, "Everybody's a suspect!" And the whole school cafeteria just went silent and stared at him.
Everybody's a suspect!
The third act of the movie is a big party at Stu's house with a lot of moving pieces going on. You got Randy explaining the horror movie rules to all of his fellow classmates while they watch Halloween. You have Gail planting a camera inside to spy on them, and some flirtation starting between her and Dewey that would be advanced later in the sequels. And you have Sydney finally giving in to Billy's desires and having sex with him, thus committing one of the sins of horror movies that Randy explains: if you have sex, you're probably gonna die. But first, Tatum dies, trying to escape Ghostface in the garage and getting stuck in the door. Never really loved this kill, to be honest. Now, I would have to assume that this was Billy that killed Tatum, since Stu is actively involved with his party at the time and still in the movie watching process, and it's before Billy shows up. So Stu wouldn't take on the mantle again until a bit later, faking Billy's death and being the one that has the chase scene with Sydney and stabbing Dewey in the back. But the big reveal in the original film is fantastic. First, you have Stu and Randy both pleading to Sydney that the other one is the killer, and Sydney just shutting the door in both of their faces is great.
Do it, he did it, please! Please, Sydney, don't!
Fuck you both!
Smart, breaks the cliche of having to choose one or the other, and I mean, what else are you going to do in that situation? Then Billy limps downstairs, takes the gun from Sidney, and shoots Randy, thus revealing he was the killer all along. But then Stu arrives too, showing that it was actually both of them working together. Now, if you think about what's happening in this scene, I really do think that this is one of the most disturbing parts of the film. Even though the actors are much older, they are playing teenagers, so essentially you have two teenage boys admitting to murdering Sidney's mom and their classmates, as well as trying to stage the final scene by stabbing each other to make it look real. This is when the movie really takes off its slasher movie mask and makes it feel more grounded and real. There's no supernatural forces here, just two psychos that are working together. Though Billy is definitely the brains of the operation, and he's doing all of this because Sidney's mom also slept with his dad, which caused his parents' divorce, and he plans to kill Sidney and blame the murders on her father. Stu really seems like he's here just for the thrill. He's way more energetic and a loose cannon. Billy is more methodical. He's also very patient, waiting an entire year to finish his revenge, whereas Stu is kind of like a wild force of nature. And it's the counterbalance between two of them that is part of why I think the first movie works so well, and they're still generally the fan favorite killers of the entire franchise. They are the perfect balance to one another. And when it comes to Stu, he is particularly loved by the fans, and how can you blame them for this amazing line delivery? Honestly, that line lives rent-free in my head, and it has for decades. But people love Stu so much that for all of these years, people have debated on if Stu really dies. Sidney manages to shove a TV onto his head, crashing onto him and electrocuting him. And remember, this is 1996. Those TVs were big motherfuckers and heavy. I'm going to wait a little longer before I really talk about Stu and all the theories therein, but for all intents and purposes, when it comes to the first movie, I do believe the intention was, yes, the TV kills him. Billy lasts a bit longer with Sidney getting the upper hand, but eventually she stabs him, Gale comes back in and shoots him, and then to avoid any cliche of the killer coming back, Sidney finishes him off by shooting him in the head.
This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
Not in my movie.
Yeah, he's not coming back. I mean, unless he's a hallucination, I guess. But we'll get there later. The original Scream, I believe, still holds up pretty damn well, and especially if you think about it in the context of where horror movies were at the time. With memorable characters, playing with the horror cliches and tropes, introducing a new iconic slasher into pop culture, and the phone call scenes traumatizing an entire generation to get caller ID. No, really, caller ID sales literally tripled in 1996 after the release of Scream. But it proved that audiences weren't done with slashers just yet. They just needed something refreshing to cleanse the palate. On a near $15 million budget, Scream grossed more than $173 million, and also had mostly positive reviews by critics. So, you know what that means? Yeah, even though Scream had a definitive ending, literally killing both of its antagonists in ways that they shouldn't come back, set in a grounded real world, there was of course demands for a sequel.
Cause let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel.
And damn, did they turn one out quick. In exactly 1 year's time, from December 96 to December 97, they would write, film, and release Scream 2. But thankfully, everybody that was involved with the original returned for the second one.
Movies don't create psychos, movies make psychos more creative.
The body count is always bigger. Death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore.
Kevin Williamson, writer of the original film, already had ideas for potential sequels and had outlined many of the events of Scream 2 before they even got started. But what continues to be unique about Scream is the creative team behind it. See, a lot of movies in the slasher genre constantly change hands from film to film. For example, John Carpenter only wrote and directed the original Halloween, and then begrudgingly, drunkenly wrote the screenplay for part 2. He also did some music here and there for future sequels, but pretty much each subsequent sequel would have new people behind the camera and new cast members that would come and go. Nightmare on Elm Street had a similar run with a new director every time until Wes finally came back with New Nightmare a decade later. What's cool about Scream is that the entire cast and creative team behind it stayed on board for the sequels. Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Jamie Kennedy all came back to reprise their roles from the first movie, and with Kevin still writing the script and Wes Craven still directing it, it really helps the series feel consistent in its tone and energy. It would be one of the only slasher series to have an ongoing, consistent main cast, at least for a while. Scream 2 would also continue to recognize and comment on movie tropes, but this time it very much focuses on the idea of sequels in general. There's a scene where Randy is in a film class and they discuss the idea of how rare it is that a sequel is better than the original, and they try to provide some examples.
Aliens, far better than the first.
Yeah, well, there's no accounting for taste.
In the scene also, there's a moment that Randy corrects another student about a line that Ripley has in the movie Aliens.
Get away from her, you bitch. I believe the line is stay away from her, you bitch. It's film class, right?
But in this moment, Randy actually gets it wrong, and the other kid was right. The line is, get away from her, you bitch, not stay away from her, you bitch.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Maybe the intent was for Randy to be wrong, but Randy is the resident movie nerd of the series, and I feel like he should know this. Imagine getting a movie fact wrong from a movie you like. It's like saying Krug's son was his brother, or that the little girl from Dawn of the Dead 04 was Anna's daughter and not the neighbor girl. Imagine getting those facts wrong and then forever being immortalized in a YouTube video that you can't go back and correct that's already uploaded. A movie fan getting a movie fact wrong? Anyways, Randy is awesome and I totally forgive him for this. Scream 2 follows suit of the original, opening with a big elaborate kill scene, but in a very, very different way. It introduces the idea of a new fictional horror movie within this universe called Stab, which will essentially be the Scream movies in the Scream universe. So even though Scream 2 was released just a year after the first movie, the story is meant to be a couple of years later. Most sources say 1998, which doesn't really seem like enough time, but whatever, let's go with it. It's enough time for Gale Weathers to have written a book about the events of the first film, and now that book is being adapted into a movie called Stab, which in universe, Stab is directed by Robert Rodriguez. And at this time in his career, it would be around the time Robert Rodriguez did From Dusk Till Dawn and The Faculty. So if he had actually directed Stab, that would be a pretty impressive 3 horror film run. So our opening is 2 characters, Maureen and Phil, going to the premiere of the Stab movie, and I gotta say, this theater experience is nuts. Keep in mind, Stab is not an established franchise yet. This is just the first movie in the series. But people are so hyped that they're dressing up as Ghostface. Hell, even the theater is handing out Ghostface costumes. People are screaming, they're pretending to kill one another, they're throwing popcorn everywhere. And as much as I want to say that movie theaters are never like this, I was proven wrong this year because this is basically what saying chicken jockey at the Minecraft movie screening was like. But it drives the point home. Again, in universe, Stab is based on real events. Real people died. And here we have a bunch of people hooting and hollering as fans that are eating up the sensationalized retelling of actual murders. It's a commentary on our disconnect from the real-world horrors, and also the idea how movie studios and corporations would want to cash in on real people suffering in order to rake in some cash. It's a fantastic idea. We see a lot of the opening of Stab in the theater, which recreates Casey's death from the beginning of the first movie. She's being played by Heather Graham here, and the Stab movie pushes the real events even further by having her get naked and take a shower before the phone call, which you don't actually get to see here, but if that bums you out, you can always watch Heather Graham in the movie Boogie Nights that came out just around the same time. You're welcome. Anyway, the characters we follow here are college students, and Maureen, played by Jada Pinkett, having some kind of entanglement with this guy Phil, I imagine, is reluctantly seeing the movie with him, and she's not really into horror films at all. Phil goes to take a bathroom break and hears something freaky happening in the next stall, and for some reason puts his face up against the bathroom stall wall. That's just like a rule that you don't do. I don't know how this Ghostface would know that he would get into that stall specifically. Like, what if the other 2 Ghostface that are pissing in the urinals just finished before he got in there? But anyway, this Ghostface assumes his identity and then sits next to Maureen, soon stabbing her in the gut as the crowd is so focused and hyped on the fictional horror in front of them that they don't even notice the real horror until it's too late, and kind of puts into perspective the thing that we're all happily enjoying. Scream 2 moves our main characters out of high school and into college, but no longer takes place in Woodsboro. Instead, it's a fictional college named Windsor, but the weird thing is that this movie is set in the state of Ohio. The first movie was in California. So this means that both Sydney and Randy decided to go to the same college across the entire country, as well as the movie having Gail and Dewey show up, who would have had to make the trip once hearing about the murders. I'm not saying that it's not possible that they would go this far, but that is quite the distance to travel. I can buy that Sydney would want to be as far away from her hometown as possible after the first movie, but for everybody else in the movie that returns, that's an impressive trip. But we also have a bunch of new characters to introduce as well, and many, if not all of them, are all of our new suspects for this movie's killer. We have Sydney's new boyfriend, Derek, who is presented to be a very sweet, loving, and protective guy, but Sydney is still a bit distant from him because her last boyfriend, well, you know why. In Randy's film class, we meet a few other characters, like the nerd that he banters with named Mickey, along with Cece. Sydney has a roommate named Holly, who is very supportive of Sydney, and Gail has a new cameraman named Joel, who is a bit hesitant of this entire ordeal. A fellow journalist named Debbie Salt is also a bit of a rival for Gail, and we have Cotton Weary. Now, he was briefly in the first movie on the television screen, but he is the man who was falsely accused of murdering Sydney's mother, and now he's free. And now that the real killers were exposed, he is looking to get his 15 minutes of fame within the press and media. Now, this gives us a good handful of potential characters. However, the killer reveals in this movie are not nearly as interesting or memorable as the originals, but a lot of this might have to do with the fact that there were script leaks. See, by 1997, there was this new thing that had been around for a few years called the internet.
What the fuck is the internet?
And early versions of the script had leaked online. So, in an attempt to not give the leakers satisfaction and still have surprises, a lot of the plot got reworked, including changing the killers. According to some sources online, Derek, Holly, and Cotton were originally all part of the killer team. But this was changed instead to give us Mickey and Debbie, who ends up being revealed as Nancy Loomis, the mother of Billy Loomis from the first movie. The problem with this change is that both Mickey and Debbie, or Nancy, whatever you want to call her, they have very minor roles in the film, and neither of them feel very much connected to any of our cast. Billy and Stu work so well not just because they were better written characters, but because they were part of the group for the entire ride. Mickey only shows up to comment on things here and there and banter with Randy about movies, and Debbie, well, she's only really around in scenes in public that involve Gail. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea to have Billy's mom as the killer here. It also shows that it runs in the family, but I feel like whatever the original script was probably wove the killers into the story much better. But I don't know. In 1997, I was 8 years old and I wasn't reading horror movie scripts leaking online, so I can't tell you fully what the original version was. There's a big introduction scene on campus with numerous characters interacting and reacting to the murders. An important interaction here is between Dewey and Gail, who had some flirtation in the first film, but they haven't seen each other since, and Gail has written a book that portrayed Dewey as being a very incompetent cop, so he is understandably resentful of her. But Scream 2 is the true budding of their actual romance for one another. The bickering has an edge of flirtation to it, and later they team up to investigate things and share their first kiss, as well as their first boob grab. Seeing these two characters get together is what many people, myself included, wanted, and the crazy thing is that their chemistry wasn't just good acting. Behind the scenes, Courtney Cox and David Arquette were also up to some boob grabbage. Now, I'm not one to care about celebrities' personal lives, and especially their love lives. I feel like that stuff is better left private, and I focus more on the characters and stuff happening in story. But I do think it's important for reference to know that, yes, Courtney Cox and David Arquette were a real-life couple behind the scenes. They even got married a few years later in 1999 and had a child together. However, their real-world relationship would eventually end around 2013 with a divorce, but they've stayed amicable and mostly have always talked positively about one another in interviews, both during and after their marriage. The first major kill after the opening in the movie is with Cece, who is played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. And this scene is always so weird for me to watch because I'm a massive Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and I'm so used to seeing Sarah Michelle Gellar kick the asses of so many various vampires, demons, and monsters that are way more powerful than just a dude in a mask. But yeah, here she is as a helpless victim. She would do this, and also I Know What You Did Last Summer around the same time, that was also written by Kevin Williamson. Her phone call scene with Ghostface is okay. It's not nearly as suspenseful and tension-building as any from the first movie, but it does a good job. Roger Jackson is still the voice of Ghostface.
Do you want to die tonight, Cece?
Then when she's stabbed and thrown off the balcony, it is pretty brutal. Now I gotta mention something in the next scene, which is a party on the campus. Even though you can barely make him out and it's completely blurry, Matthew Lillard is in the background, aka the actor that played Stu in the first movie. And for years, people have been using this to continue to confirm the theory that Stu is alive. In reality, it was just a fun thing that the filmmakers did in the background when Matthew Lillard was there visiting the set, but they should have known that you can't do this to hyper-focused movie watchers and expect it to just be swept under the rug. This one moment has fueled the fire for years to come, and you can barely even tell that it's him. He's wearing a blonde wig and is completely out of focus. And plus, don't you think Randy, who is right there, would see him and say something if it was meant to be Stu? Yeah, his hair is different, but his face is the same. And he's not exactly hiding, he's right out in plain sight. Anyway, I don't think much of it, but I'm making this video before Scream 7 comes out, so I guess you never know what could be revealed and retconned in the future. Ghostface does attack Sydney, and I'm assuming this is all Mickey. If it is meant to be Nancy Loomis, I gotta say she has some damn good physical endurance. Anyway, Ghostface escapes, wounding Derek, but since it's only a small knife cut on his arm, and nothing serious, it raises suspicion that Derek might be in on it, driving a wedge further between him and Sydney. There is a small plot point that the new killer is targeting people that have similar names as the victims from the original, and I always thought that was a weird, unnecessary plot point, especially since eventually the kills no longer follow that formula at all, such as when Randy is killed. Yes, it's unfortunate to lose him, but at least somebody from the first film had to die to raise the stakes, and it wasn't going to be Sydney, Dewey, or Gale, so it's gotta be Randy. Sorry, bro. The scene is pretty effective, as it's out in the open during the daylight where you wouldn't expect a kill to happen. Randy, Dewey, and Gale split up to look for who's spying on them, and then Randy is pulled into Gale's news van and stabbed to death, raising suspicion of her cameraman Joel, who had just so conveniently stepped away right before this happened. Also revealed later that this Ghostface was in fact Nancy Loomis, who says she went a little knife happy when Randy started talking shit about Billy. So she's doing it for her son.
What a rat-looking, homo-repressed mama's boy.
It sucks to lose Randy, but I don't have an issue with it like I will another major character death in a future sequel, but this one was done right, and it makes it feel like anyone is fair game now. In an attempt to win back Sydney's favor, Derek does an awkward singing of I Think I Love You and gets the whole cafeteria involved.
Hey, I think I love you, so what am I so afraid of? I'm afraid.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Sydney also now has 2 security officers that are following her to make sure that she's safe, but they do fail to notice the moment where Cotton Weary approaches her, asking her to do an interview with him. And as a red herring for a killer, they have Cotton be very temperamental about this. On one hand, I get it that he spent a year in prison falsely accused, and this is the person that accused him, but on the other hand, it's like, dude, don't exacerbate things, making it even worse for yourself and making yourself look like a psychopath, especially when there is an active killer on the loose. Like, have some tact, man. But for better or worse, this movie is very character-focused. Like I said, you see the chemistry and blooming relationship of Dewey and Gale come to life. You see Sydney trying to move forward with her life, but is always drawn back to the horrors of her past, and those past traumas affecting her ability to trust new people in her life. There's really only 3 kills in the first half of the movie, the opening scene and Cece, and a lot of the film is focused on different character interactions and investigations, which might seem a bit disappointing for those that come for the carnage candy that Randy says horror sequels are always supposed to have.
More blood, more gore. Carnage, candy. Your core audience just expects it.
but given the fact that the Scream characters, at least the core three, are all really, really good actors and great roles to play, I don't mind so much. I like just watching them interact. In fact, I watch Scream less for the kills and more for the characters. With Ghostface being an ever-changing identity, it's not something like Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger that keeps coming back. Here, the characters that come back are the survivors. It's all about Sidney, Dewey, and Gale. But that being said, the film does ramp up in its second half, having Dewey seemingly killed off as Gale is forced to watch, which is a pretty effective scene, and if they had killed him off here, I would have accepted it. I feel like it could have made sense. Way more than something that happens with him in a later sequel, but I'll talk about that when it comes up. Sidney's bodyguards are also completely inept and comically dispatched, leading to an awkward scene where Ghostface is knocked out in the driver's seat of a car. Sidney decides to escape the car before exposing his identity, but the suspension of disbelief here of her just not ripping off the mask immediately has always annoyed me. I get that they do it for dramatic tension, but I just feel like Sidney's character would be quicker on the draw for this one. And of course, by the time she does decide to go back and do it, Ghostface has regained consciousness and ends up killing her roommate, Hallie. The finale of the movie takes place on a stage, kind of the inverse of the movie theater opening, and Sidney had been taking theater classes the entire time. Derek is tied up as part of a fraternity hazing, but Ghostface is going to take advantage of this, showing up and pretending that Derek was his partner all along, leading Sidney to be uncertain if she should untie him. But then Derek is shot by Ghostface as he reveals himself to be Mickey, of which some would say, who?
I don't even know who you are.
You know, Mickey, the film kid that's had maybe 6 minutes of screen time, if that, the entire film. Yeah, that's the killer. Though I do have to say that Timothy Olyphant that plays Mickey goes above and beyond here. He really does a great job and does his best in this scene, and I give him all the props for it. But in story, it definitely is a weaker reveal of the franchise, and apparently he was just taking the guidance from a MILF that he met online, as any of us would, but one that happened to be Billy's mother, Nancy Loomis. And my first reaction to this is also, huh? Because of all the research that would have had to been done for Gale's book and the subsequent Stab movie, wouldn't people know what Billy's mom looks like? I assume people would have tried to contact and interview her, and when the news got out that her son was a serial killer, she would be a topic of interest. But they just quickly explained this away by saying that she lost some weight and got surgery, which, really?
I've seen pictures of you. This is 60 pounds and a lot of work later. It's called a makeover.
I guess, but look, I love this movie a lot. I do. I think Scream 2 is an incredibly entertaining watch, and as a follow-up to one of the best horror films of all time, it's actually pretty decent. But trying to think that Gale still wouldn't be able to recognize the mother of the person that she wrote an entire book about, not even having the slightest suspicion, is a little far-fetched even for me to believe for the sake of story. Say what you will about Gale's personality, but she does her job well. She's very thorough. Hell, she was the one that knew Cotton wasn't the killer of Sidney's mom before anybody else did. She's good at this shit, so how did she miss the fact that this is Billy's mother? Must have been some damn good surgery. The revealed Nancy Loomis kills Mickey, no longer needing his services, and then monologues long enough for Sidney to get the upper hand on her, of course. Oh, and Gale is accidentally shot by Mickey as he topples over, but she does survive. Eventually, Cotton Weary shows up and has a chance at redemption and to be a true hero here, but instead, he only agrees to help Sidney if she agrees to do an interview with him for the media. What a douchebag. Sidney agrees and he shoots Nancy Loomis, and after checking on Gale, Sidney takes the gun and finishes off both killers. Mickey jumps back still alive for a moment, he's taken out, and then Nancy Loomis gets a bullet to the head, dying in the exact same way that her son did, and once again ensuring that neither of these killers will be back for any kind of sequel. The movie ends with Cotton getting his media publicity that he wanted, both Gale and Dewey survive despite what could have been fatal injuries, and Sidney just kind of walks off into the distance. Yeah. Scream 2 was a rushed and frantically rewritten sequel pumped out just a year after the first, but considering all of the issues behind the scenes, I do think it turned out mostly pretty well. I don't love the killer reveals and would have preferred them to be at least more part of the movie as established main characters, but whatever. Despite its flaws, I do find myself enjoying this one a lot whenever I watch it. I like the college campus setting, the kills work for me, and the main trio are all able to further advance their character arcs, making them feel less disposable like many other slasher sequels. For what it's worth, I think Scream 2 delivers for at least 80% of its runtime. It was never going to be as good as the first, and it didn't try to be. It's simply just the next chapter. And although the next part would come out a few years later, Kevin Williamson had written more ideas for a potential third installment. And with it, it would wrap up the first era of the Scream franchise, and at that time, and for a number of years later, it would be known as the Scream Trilogy.
Don't ask, don't tell.
When it comes to Scream 3, this is an odd movie to talk about. And I don't just mean because there's stuff like this in it, but because, for a time, this was kind of the black sheep of the franchise. But all of the reasonings for that are very much centered around the specific time period in which it came out. And without context, watching it now, you might think that they just dropped the ball really hard on this one. And maybe that was the reason why there was never another Scream movie for another 11 years. But at the same time, when it comes to reviewing a movie, I do have to talk about what is the actual content itself and give my opinion based upon what already exists. So what I'm trying to say is that the Scream 3 that we ultimately got, that is canon, is not the original vision for what the movie was supposed to be, and there's many behind-the-scenes reasons for that that are not really expressed in the film. For starters, Kevin Williamson, that wrote the first two movies, would not pen the script for the third one this time around. He had now successfully launched his TV series, Dawson's Creek, and he was heavily involved in working on that at the time. So they took the outlines and ideas that he had for the third film, and the writing duties went to Aaron Kruger, who would go on to write the screenplay for the American version of The Ring. He also wrote a bunch of the Transformers movies and even Top Gun Maverick, so lots of variety here. They were also trying to take more precautions to prevent the script leaks like what happened with Scream 2, and so everything had to be kept very secret. But the biggest influence on the direction that Scream 3 would take actually came from a real-world tragedy that occurred on April 20th, 1999, called the Columbine High School Massacre. Two students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, planned and executed an attack on their fellow students, bringing guns and bombs that they had made themselves into the school and murdering 13 people, injuring another 20, before taking their own lives. I know this might seem strange in our modern times, but back then, something like this was unheard of, and it shut the country down. People were panicking. Nowadays, we hear about a shooting way too often, but this was something that nobody was prepared for back in 1999, especially the fact that it involved teenagers. Everybody was trying to figure out why two teens would do such a horrible thing, and that there must be some kind of reason for it. So, with investigations into them, there was a lot of evidence of the planned attack beforehand. There was journal entries, online activity, and videos they had made to get further insight into who these kids were and what they were all about. But with that, the media and other outlets started to jump on things that the kids were interested in, such as heavy music, violent video games like Doom, and of course, violent movies. Now, violence in media, in fiction in general, has always been a target, and this was true even before this event happened. But after it did, people were scared, angry, and confused, and they wanted something to blame, and I totally get that. But because of this, studio executives took notice and had a massive influence on the movies that were being released at the time. Nobody wanted to make a movie that was too close to home. Now, I hate to say it, but I kind of agree with Billy Loomis on this one.
Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative!
I think that if somebody has it within them to hurt another person like this and actually go through with it, it's not because of a movie or a game or music. It's because of that person. Millions of other people watch and play and listen to these things all the time and can separate reality from fiction. It's never something as simple as just seeing a movie and then thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to go commit violence. I think that if somebody is in that headspace, anything could be a trigger, but I digress. Let me bring it back to the point here. Scream 3 was being written. Scream, a series that started with its first movie being about two teenage boys that kill their classmates. Yeah. So even though producers wanted Scream 3 to be made so that they could make money, they also wanted to protect their asses from the current backlash that was going on in the world, and so they told the creators to tone down the blood and violence of this movie. Tone down the blood and violence? This is a Scream movie. Some sources even say that it was requested that they show no blood at all in this film, to which even Wes Craven pushed back on and said, let's be serious here. So essentially, we have a watered-down horror movie that pushed an extra amount of the satire and comedy that was not written by the original creator, and also was coming out at a time where people were turned off by violent media. And that's not even all of it. Because originally, Scream 3 was going to be set back in Woodsboro, where the first movie took place, and feature basically a cult of teenagers imitating Ghostface, who had now been popularized even more in-universe because of the Stab movies. And this group of killers were all going to be influenced and led by a mastermind, who was Stu Macher. Matthew Lillard was actually signed on to reprise his role, or at least he says so here.
I had actually been hired to come back in Scream 3 as the killer. And then when Columbine broke out, they scratched the entire script.
The big reveal was that he was going to be the leader of the Ghostfaces at the end, giving them orders even from his prison cell. So this would have been the first confirmation that they were saying, yes, the big-ass TV that fell on Stu did not actually kill him. See, I told you Stu was going to come up a lot in this video. He is a character that fans really want back. He makes a huge impression in that first movie, and hey, if he didn't die, why not bring him back? But it becomes a problem because since the original story is about a bunch of teenagers that want to be famous killers and go out killing, the studio was like, no, we cannot do this right now. So instead of just pausing or holding off on Scream 3, it instead had its ideas reworked, and the script that we got took out the entire Stu Macher storyline. Thus further confusing the idea, is Stu alive or is he not alive? Well, as of the recording of this, we still don't know. But with all that behind the scenes out of the way, let's talk about the actual movie that we got. Our opening scene this time starts with Cotton Weary, who has taken his 15 minutes of fame that he wanted in Scream 2 to the next level, and has now somehow managed to star hosting a TV show called 100% Cotton. Wow. He's also supposed to be doing a cameo in Stab 3, but he's not too happy about having to do it. He gets a phone call while driving that sounds like a sexy lady wanting to get his attention, and then the lady starts to sound even sexier.
What makes you think I have a girlfriend?
I know you do.
Yes, this is the new Ghostface who is currently at Cotton's girlfriend's house, which means the girl he was talking to on the phone, he was going to cheat on his girlfriend with anyways. But one of the new big changes in this movie is that the voice changer effect that Ghostface uses is now super advanced and can literally change his voice to sound like anybody.
Okay, I'm sorry, babe. I didn't mean to scare you that bad. It's me. Come on, open the door.
What are you talking about?
Talking about how much fun it's gonna be to rip your insides out.
And my suspension of disbelief is really pushed to its limit with this one. Look, nowadays in 2025 with AI technology, it's legitimately scary how people's voices can be replicated, and people are already deceiving each other all the time with it and using new scam phone call technology to actually use people's real voices. And I think humanity is probably soon to be doomed. But Scream 3 came out in the year 2000, and there was no technology at the time that could do that this well, especially something that was a handheld device that you could carry around with you. This is crashing into levels of science fiction, and it's never explained or talked about what this device is. Ghostface just happens to have this super advanced technology from the future, and we all just have to accept it. I get the idea is cool, but it doesn't make any sense. Cotton finally arrives, but his girlfriend now thinks he's the killer because of the voice changer, and then Ghostface comes in and dispatches both of them. Scream 3 tends to take its meta-commentary to the next level because the whole movie is centered in Hollywood during the making of Stab 3. Yeah, I guess we missed Stab 2, it must have came out in between movies, but I heard it was good. The ironic thing is that Stab 3 takes place back in Woodsboro, so kinda like what the original Scream 3 was gonna be. And we also see a movie set recreating things like Stu's house from the first movie. And as the first Scream movie commented on horror movies and slashers, the second one commented on sequels, Scream 3 is centered around the commentary of trilogies, the film that ends an entire arc where anybody can die, and it reshapes how we viewed the first movie. They have a video left behind by Randy so that we can have a cameo of him in the movie where he gets to explain it.
Because you are not dealing with a sequel. You are dealing with the concluding chapter
of a trilogy.
Our main trio returns once again. Sydney is now living in isolation only with her dog and working for a call center for abused women victims. Dewey and Gale, though getting close in Scream 2, seem to have parted ways once again. Dewey is acting as a technical advisor on the set of Stab 3, but is also here investigating a potential threat of somebody looking for Sydney's location. And Gale, who has now written another book about the last murders, is informed by the detective of Cotton's murder and heads to the Stab 3 set in order to investigate on her own, and of course comes face to face with Dewey again. Dewey, who is now being very flirtatious with the actress that is playing Gale in the Stab 3 movie. Also, Gale famously has the worst haircut imaginable in this movie with her bangs. Everybody brings it up, and if I don't mention it, people will ask me why. It's actually a point that most people talk about when it comes to Scream 3. My only explanation for it, they were still trying to make the movie as scary as they could without too much blood and gore, so they went with this instead. Yeah, so we get the meta extreme here and have a bunch of characters that are actors, some of which are playing our real main characters in the fictional Stab 3 movie. Jennifer is the actress that is playing Gale, and it creates a fun third wheel situation for Gale and Dewey in the movie. Angelina is the actress playing Sydney in Stab 3. Tom is playing Dewey. Though I do wonder why, if this is Stab 3, all of their costumes look like how the characters would have looked in the first movie, but I guess it doesn't matter. Other actors working on Stab 3 are Sarah and Tyson, and the movie is being directed by Roman Bridger, who doesn't want the production to stop just because of some real murders that are happening, which is also meta for the film that we got. In the scene introducing them, we also see Lance Henriksen playing the producer of Stab 3, John Milton. Always loved when we see Lance Henriksen in a movie, and also a very quick cameo from Roger Corman playing the studio executive. Roger Corman is a low-budget horror sci-fi legend that has produced countless numbers of wild movies over the past several decades, so it's super cool to see him have a small cameo here. Other suspects in the movie would include Detective Mark Kincaid, played by Patrick Dempsey. He is not the killer in this movie, but he would get to go on to be a killer in a very Scream-inspired movie years later, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. And some other characters here are like Patrick Warburton playing one of the security guards that gets killed off.
I can't believe you said that. That makes me angry.
After Gale storms off the set of Stab 3, she is greeted by, Jay and Silent Bob. Yeah, Jay and Silent Bob are in this movie.
Oh, it's that TV news chick, Connie fucking Chung. Hey, Connie, how's Maury?
Like, actually in it. Okay, it's just a small cameo, but this is definitely their characters. Like, this is not Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes. This is absolutely Jay and Silent Bob, which leads to the question, does the Scream universe and the View Askew universe take place within the same continuity? If you're unfamiliar, View Askew is the shared universe of films that is created by Kevin Smith that often feature his characters, Jay and Silent Bob, a world that is mostly grounded in the same of ours, with characters often talking with a lot of pop culture references and movie discussions, which is similar to Scream. But it's also a world where heaven and hell are confirmed to exist, an angel named Bartleby looks exactly like Ben Affleck, and Alanis Morissette is God. Oh, and there's also comic book characters based on Jay and Silent Bob named Bluntman and Chronic, which were adapted into a live-action film where Mark Hamill plays the villain named Cockknocker.
Why do they call you Cockknocker? Actually, there's a funny story behind that.
So if Jay and Silent Bob are in Scream 3 confirming their existence, that means that Bluntman and Chronic could have actually been made into a real movie that exists within the Scream universe that at least one of our three main characters, probably Dewey, actually sat down and watched. But it goes further than that, because there's also a scene in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back that came out in 2001 where they visit a variety of Hollywood movie sets and they happen upon the filming of Shannon Doherty running from a Ghostface killer, and then reveals Ghostface to be a monkey.
But the market research says people love monkeys.
We love this monkey! Do something.
See?
Yeah, and that's Wes Craven in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back directing this. But they never mention the word Scream in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. So maybe this is not Wes Craven directing a Scream movie. Maybe this is Wes Craven directing a Stab movie. Maybe he's filming Stab 4 and the killer of that movie was a monkey. Or maybe it was just a fun cameo in both movies, but you never know. I'm saying it's a shared universe. One thing that I think works really well in this movie are some of the dream sequences where Sydney is seeing visions of her dead mother. It's actually legitimately creepy, but this is from the same guy that directed Nightmare on Elm Street, so that makes sense. Actually, Sydney's mom is a major plot point of this movie, with the killer leaving photos of her younger self at various kill scenes, along with the killer targeting his victims in the order they are to be killed in the Stab 3 script, all while he's trying to lure Sydney out of hiding. The first victim is Sarah, that, nobody cared about to begin with. She's played by Jenny McCarthy, who I guess is famous for being a model or something. I don't know. Most of the characters that get killed off in this movie, you really never cared about to begin with. The investigation begins as the actors in the Stab movie start to panic over who could be next, and at one moment, 3 of the actors and Gale and Dewey are together as Ghostface taunts them through a fax machine.
Interior Jennifer's house, living room night, the script page.
Yeah, we have super advanced AI voice-changing technology that can mimic anybody's voice perfectly, but we also still have fax machines. Also, this scene is admittedly very stupid. Tom goes into the house where the power was cut to read the fax, but because it's too dark, he flips open a lighter to read it that ignites the gas that had been leaking and blows up the house. I don't like to use the word contrived a lot when reviewing movies, but this one is a stretch. How could Ghostface possibly plan the idea that somebody would go back inside the house and specifically use a lighter to light up the darkness so that they could read the fax script? Not only that, but what if all of them went back in the house at the same time? I mean, that would save Ghostface a lot of time because this is pretty much every one of his victims here, but also it would make the ending of the movie impossible because he would have no leverage to bring Sydney to his house. And literally, the script that came through in the fax says that the person that would die would be the one that smelled the gas. And nobody smelled the gas. It filled up the house enough that a lighter could cause it to explode, but nobody realized it was even there. And to think Dewey just wouldn't get everybody out of the house immediately anyways, I don't know. I really hate this scene. Eventually, Sydney does decide to get herself to Hollywood to help with the investigation, and she reunites with Dewey and Gale. Oh, and I guess so does Randy's sister, Martha. Oh, what, you didn't know that Randy had a sister? Yeah, neither did anybody else. She's just here. They just let her on the Hollywood set, and she's only here to deliver Randy's final video message so that he could have a cameo in the movie, and then she does nothing else. But yeah, she exists now. But I will admit that the scenes with Gale and Jennifer working together are actually pretty great. They have fantastic chemistry together, good back and forth banter, and even though it doesn't feel like a horror movie, their interactions are a ton of fun to watch. I really hope that the Jennifer character sticks around for future sequels because she's really funny. Oh, never mind, she's dead. Sydney gets to wander the set of Stab 3, seeing the recreated Stu house as well as her old bedroom that is shockingly accurate for a recreation. For a moment, it's a great scene. Again, emphasizing all of this entertainment and movie making is in-universe, based on real murders that destroyed Sydney's life. It's like, imagine seeing your most traumatic moments turned into a stage play for the world to celebrate. And then we get our first Sydney is attacked scene by Ghostface, again, which won't make a lot of sense, because if he was successful here, he wouldn't have her at the end of the movie where the reveal happens. But it seems like every Scream movie needs to have at least one Sydney is in danger scene before the eventual finale. Speaking of that, I'm just going to jump to the finale because it makes more sense to explain everything in bulk here. There's a party happening at the director Roman's house where everybody is attacked by Ghostface. Parker, Tyson, and Angelina all die within a couple of moments, but Gale and Dewey are just captured after Dewey is knocked out with a knife. You know, as much as Randy warned that the third part of a trilogy, anybody who is an established character is now up for grabs that they can die, nobody does. I mean, I guess unless you count Cotton in the beginning. But nobody dies in this movie that you don't already expect to, and once again, Dewey and Gale are fine. Dewey very well could have died in Scream 2, But since they had him come back again for 3, and since at the time this was going to be the last Scream movie, I guess they decided instead that they wanted to give all the main characters a happy ending. And I can appreciate that, but there's literally no suspense here when they just get out of everything. At least in Scream 1 and 2, Dewey got stabbed and seriously injured, and in Scream 2, Gale got shot. At least they had some minor consequences in those movies, but not so much for Scream 3. When Sidney arrives, we get the big killer reveal, and it's Roman, the director of Stab 3, but also he's Sidney's half-brother. What? What the fuck? Yeah. So the reason the photos of Sidney's mom were being left at the crime scene is because at one point in time, Sidney's mom, Maureen Prescott, went to Hollywood to try to be an actress, but she never told anybody about it. And though she only starred in 3 low-budget Roger Corman-esque horror movies, she used a different name, Rena Reynolds. After a party with the producers that she went to got too wild, she was sexually assaulted by some of those producers. Also, in real life, Harvey Weinstein was a producer of this movie, so talk about meta commentary. Anyway, Roman is the child of that experience that Maureen Prescott left behind and never took care of. And somehow, now, he has grown up to be a movie director and conveniently is working on Stab 3. Apparently, he had finally tracked down his mom shortly before the first Scream movie, finding out her true identity, but when he revealed himself to her, she rejected him. This, along with seeing that she had built up a new family and had Sidney that she did take care of, set him into a rage. Roman stalked and filmed Maureen having an affair with Billy Loomis's father, and then provided that evidence to Billy himself. So, yes, Scream 3 is trying to say that basically Roman was the one who initially motivated Billy to murder Sidney's mom and set the events of the Scream movies into motion, giving him the tape and even communicating with him and suggesting that he had an accomplice to take the fall if he needed to, which is why Billy recruited Stu. So Scream 3 introduces a new character that is meant to be related to Sidney and also the secret mastermind that put the events of the entire franchise into motion. Now, I don't think that Roman completely works as a character, but the way that it's done, thankfully to me, doesn't ruin anything about the original, and that's the thing I'd be most nervous about. Basically, he just made Billy aware of what was happening, but Billy still made all of his own choices, and he's not lessened as a killer because of Roman. But wow, did they really stretch to try to connect everything together? Hollywood and filmmaking, Maureen wanting to be an actress, then the real-life events getting turned into an actual movie, which is Stab, Sidney's mom's trauma that led to her affair, connecting Roman to Billy, Roman conveniently landing a job as a Stab movie director after the initial murders were made into a franchise so that he could lure Sidney to Hollywood, as well as being able to pull all of this off with no partner, basically playing the role of Ghostface in every single kill scene that we see, along with all of the phone calls, doing that himself, and setting things up perfectly so that Sidney is here at this specific time so that he could use Dewey and Gale as leverage to get her here and then reveal this ultimate plan by also having the footage lined up to play, knowing that she would come into this room and finally reveal himself to be her half-brother. Wow. The amount of luck and convenient outcomes to get us here are beyond any realm of believability that I am going to have to just go and watch Bluntman and Chronic after this to cleanse my palate. Roman kills the producer, John Milton, who had hosted the party where Maureen was assaulted, and then he plans to blame all of the murders on Sidney herself. But Sidney just decides to throw hands with him. Yeah, fuck it. All he has on him is a knife, and those Ghostface costumes are really hard to maneuver in, so yeah, just beat the shit out of him. And she does, at least until the detective comes in and ruins everything. Roman knocks him out, takes the gun, but Sidney was wearing a bulletproof vest. Again, so is Roman. But my god, even with a bulletproof vest on, the impact of those gunshots gotta be doing some damage. Dewey arrives and shoots Roman several times in the chest, but he just keeps coming like he's some kind of crazy meth addict. Until Sidney finally says to shoot him in the head, in which he does.
Shoot him in the head!
And also, this means technically, this is Dewey's first time killing a Ghostface killer. Both Scream 1 and 2 had Sidney delivering the final blows. And yeah, like I said, it seems like they wanted to give all of their characters a happy ending in order to finish off the trilogy. Dewey and Gale are not only back together, but Dewey proposes to her and she says yes. Also, Sidney is comfortable enough to leave her door unlocked and even open, basically saying that she's earned the right to feel safe once more. I mean, personally, I have not had 3 separate events of killers coming after me, but even I would not leave my door wide open like that. Scream 3 does have its fans, and it's not a terrible movie, and because of the behind-the-scenes changes, I do try to give it more of a pass. But ultimately, this movie feels like such a massive step down from the first 2. There's barely any horror here, it has the tamest kill scenes, no sense of danger, and Roman as a killer is just okay, passable at best. I do like the idea of the movie happening on a movie set. I like movies that are about making movies, and I enjoy a lot of the character interactions here, especially between Gail and Jennifer. But the contrivances of the story and the pure convenience of everything working out just way too perfectly is a little much for me, as well as it feels like Scream had already began to jump the shark. The Ghostface calls were no longer scary or interesting, and when Ghostface is using a fax machine of all things, it really loses the punch. There's a lot of silliness in here, there's a lot of comedy that's ramped up. It never feels like anybody who matters is in actual danger, a problem that would persist in the future of the Scream franchise as well, because its characters are seemingly so important to the story that there's a fear in committing to killing any of them. And as far as the mystery aspect of wondering who the killer is, finding out it was Roman, it works in terms of what he's doing in the movie, but the backstory of who he is and his involvement in everything, it's a lot to go with. Honestly, at the time, I was glad that this was the last Scream movie. Wes Craven, along with the cast, were going to move on to other projects, and nobody was there to take up the mantle of Scream until much later. Hell, later the same year after Scream 3 came out, Scary Movie would release, a meta-comedy about a meta-horror franchise.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Basically showing Ghostface was no longer going to be scary. It was all too much, it was oversaturated, and for a time, Scream was definitely over.
Since Ryan is no longer here, let me introduce the next film, Scream 4. This came out 11 years after the third, and we never thought we'd really get any other Scream movies. But Wes Craven, along with the original cast, returned and gave us quite a fitting finale for the director's filmography. Unfortunately, Wes Craven had passed away after this, leaving Scream 4 to be his final film. But as far as final films go, it's pretty damn good if you ask me. So now sit back, relax, and get ready for the final Craven Scream.
A lot of things happened in the world between Scream 3 and Scream 4, which came out 11 years apart from one another. 3 things in particular I think are the most significant. There was 9/11, then everybody started using cell phones along with the advent of the smartphone, and most importantly, there was an exhausting amount of horror movie remakes that sweep the 2000s and the 2010s. Scream would luck out, and even to this day, never had a legitimate remake. But as all previous entries had commented on a particular type of film, Part 4 would provide its meta-commentary on horror movie remakes in general, bringing the story of the movie back to Woodsboro where it all began, and having a new pair of killers mimicking and recreating the original murders of that first film. In the time between movies, Wes Craven had made 3 other films: Cursed, which was also written by Kevin Williamson, centered around werewolves; Red Eye, which was more of your average suspense thriller film; and My Soul to Take, which the less said about that movie, the better. Williamson had also finished Dawson's Creek and started a new TV show, The Vampire Diaries, and while it was on hiatus, he came to an agreement with the studio to begin working on a Scream 4. Wes Craven, from what I understand and researched, was hesitant at first to return to the franchise, but after really liking the script, as well as getting the chance to get the band back together again, he did sign on to return. And this shocked everybody because we all assumed that Scream was going to be left alone as a trilogy. But there was also an immediate nostalgia and getting the chance to catch up with Sidney, Dewey, and Gale and see where they all were a decade later. Plus another slasher movie from Wes Craven with the original Scream writer. Hey, I'll take it. And perhaps against all odds, I do have to say that I think Scream 4 is pretty damn good. At least way better than it has any right to be. Thankfully, by this point, enough time had passed that there wasn't a script mandate for any kind of censorship that Part 3 had. And you do notice a significant increase in the bloodshed of this movie. It's still tame compared to other slashers, but there is a huge difference between the violence in Scream 3 and the violence in Scream 4. And I'm very thankful for that. Now, unlike in our real world, in the universe of Scream, the Stab movies did not stop at a trilogy. The movie opens with a false opening of Stab 6, which then turns out to be the opening of Stab 7, which then cuts to the in-universe opening of our actual movie. Yeah, it's Stabception.
It's also predictable. There's no element of surprise. You can see everything coming.
It's a movie within a movie within... Look, the point is, the first two girls that we see in the opening get killed, but they're just characters in a movie that's being watched by the second group of girls, which are then revealed to also be characters that are watched by our real-life actual characters that then get killed. Alright, I can't explain it well enough, but we get 3 opening kill scenes here, with only the third one actually being real. Also, if the beginning of Stab 7 is a fake opening of Stab 6, then what is the real opening of Stab 6? Also, we know nothing about Stab 4 and Stab 5, which leans further into my theory that in-universe, Wes Craven did direct Stab 4, and the killer of that movie was a monkey. Anyway, what I think the movie does well, and some people might hate me for this, but I think it does even better than Scream 5, is that it introduces a new cast of younger characters while simultaneously respecting and advancing the story of our original main trio. The story does take place back in Woodsboro, and Sydney is arriving as part of a book tour where she has now also written a book about her experiences from her perspective. In town, we also see that Dewey and Gale are still together, thankfully. Dewey has become the sheriff of the town, which puts a lot more responsibility on top of him. But Gale is no longer a reporter, and she struggles to find ideas for her next book. And just for context of the time passing, Sydney, if she was 17 in the original film, she would be around 32 years old in Scream 4. And for the younger cast, they're all around the same age as Sydney was in the first movie. We have Jill Roberts, who is played by Emma Roberts, and every time I see this actress, I just want to call her Jill for some reason, and I forget that her actual name is Emma. But she plays Sydney's cousin, who we've never seen before, but to be fair, in the original movie, she would have just been a baby. She is fantastic in this movie, and I'll get to why later. Her friend Kirby Reed is played by Hayden Panettiere, who has become a fan-favorite character that has extensive movie knowledge, but is also a snarky badass that doesn't take any shit. She is very good in this movie, and another standout character. There's also the third friend of the group, Olivia Morris, who, unlike the other two, there's not really anything here, and she's barely a character, just here to die. Jill has an ex-boyfriend named Trevor, who seems very suspicious at first, maybe similar to Billy Loomis, but I also think a lot of the red herring of his character is because he has such limited screen time. There's the two geek teens, Robbie and Charlie, and something that I find really interesting about Robbie's quirk is that he wears this headset that constantly streams his life to the internet. But this was back in 2011, where streaming was not nearly as massive as it is now. And I find it funny how Scream kind of predicted the idea of somebody streaming their everyday life 24/7 online, because we have a lot of those kinds of people out there now. It's kind of like how Scream 3 predicted the AI voice changer. See, these screenwriters, they were ahead of the game. But what seems silly and over the top as this character that's always streaming in 2011 is now commonplace. Some other new characters here include Jill's mom, Kate, who would have been Maureen's sister. We have Rebecca, Sydney's publicist. Judy, a police officer who has a huge crush on Dewey, making for some great banter between her and Gale.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And 2 other police officers, Anthony and Ross. Anthony, played by Anthony Anderson, and also the character's full name is Anthony Perkins, which is the name of the actor who played Norman Bates in the original Psycho, but this character barely has anything to do other than have a few comical scenes and then get killed, so it's weird for giving him a name connection to a classic horror icon. but I guess it's just another one of those Kevin Williamson references to throw in there. But it's not long after Sydney arrives back in her hometown that the new murders begin to happen, with the killer putting the stolen phone and the murder weapon in the trunk of Sydney's rental car. What I love here are the interactions between Dewey and Sydney, because he really is fully in the protective older brother role here, and you can tell that he's frantic to stop this as soon as possible and not have to have Sydney go through this once again. He's also keeping Gale a bit in the dark as much as he can in order to protect her and to do his job properly, but of course, that's not Gale's style, so she begins to do the investigations of the murders on her own. The Ghostface phone call scenes in this movie are also way better than the last two. I felt like Scream 2 and 3 just didn't capture the phone calls as well as they could have, but Part 4 does it right.
Open the closet door.
You do know there are cops all over this house.
I think I'd have just enough time to slice someone open. I've got plans for you. I'm gonna slit your eyelids in half so you don't blink when I stab you in the face.
There's a scene where the killer calls Kirby and Jill, but he's actually in Olivia's house across the street. And it's a good bait and switch for the scenario, as well as them just having to watch through the window as their friend is killed without being able to get there in time. Sydney does run to the house, but she gets there too late, and we see just the most brutal aftermath of this murder. The killer's threats to her over the phone are also really scary, lining up with the original and making sense with the theme of a remake. Ghostface does attack Sydney and Jill here, but just like recreating the attack on Sydney in the first movie, this is in order to throw her off the trail of Jill herself. Yes, she is secretly one of our killers, but I'll talk about her at the end. The next kill is of Sydney's publicist, which I don't think really recreates any moment from the first movie, and she was definitely set up as an annoying character to begin with, so of course she's going to be part of the body count. The two film club nerds are kind of our surrogates for the Randy character here. He doesn't get a video message or cameo in this film, unfortunately, but these guys all talk about the idea of remakes and how the new killer is likely using the new innovations that we have, like cell phones to film the murders and streaming devices to record all of the kills, eventually assembling them into their own movie, which is a highly disturbing thought just on its own, to film your own stab movie as you actively partake in the murders. Also, with the remakes, you have to do the unexpected, as audiences are used to the formula, as well as everything is more exaggerated and more gory, and I think they capitalize on all of these things in this movie. They also state the only surefire way to survive a modern horror remake is to be gay.
The only surefire way to survive a modern horror movie? You pretty much have to be gay.
I'm gay. I'm gay. If it helps.
But actually, that doesn't work either. They assume the finale of this real-life movie remake is going to take place at a party in order to mimic Stu's house, which here is going to be a barn party called Stabathon, where all the kids are binge-watching all of the Stab movies. To which I have to say, doesn't Stab have 7 movies at this point? And assuming each movie is at least 90 minutes long, we would be talking about a bare minimum 11-hour marathon here. They start the first movie when it's already dark out, so technically this party would have to start at like 8 or 9 p.m. and go all the way into the morning. I mean, actually, I guess I forget now that I'm in my 30s. They're all teenagers. They could probably pull this off and have the stamina for it. But I would definitely have to start my marathon a lot earlier. Gale sneaks into the party with her very clever disguise of a Ghostface mask and does some dance moves to fit in. Love it. It's also cool to see footage from Stab 1 that we saw in the opening scene of Scream 2, but we see it here in a different context. First we saw it as its premiere, and now we see it as a movie that people have grown up with. Gale plants a camera to spy on the party, but when she returns to her van to watch the footage, Ghostface begins to cover up all the cameras, and on her way back into the barn, he attacks her. It is unfortunate that she's kind of taken out of the movie at this point. She does survive, but she is stabbed, and she has to go to the hospital until the final scene. But it's not the first time something like this has happened. It's kind of similar how they took Dewey out before the final act of Scream 2. Speaking of Dewey, I love how he runs in here guns blazing to save Gale. The man is so desperate to stop the situation happening, but he's always one step behind. Soon after this, the 2 useless police officers are killed, and then Ghostface attacks Sydney once again, managing to kill her Aunt Kate in the process. A huge part of the third act takes place at Kirby's house, where we get to spend a good amount of time with our younger cast, and similarly to the original Scream, they all do feel like they know each other well, and there's good back and forth between them. That's why I say I kind of like this younger cast the best. Jill's ex Trevor seems once more very suspicious here, and we also have Charlie, who has been crushing on Kirby the entire time and awkwardly fails to make a move, so Kirby just makes it for him. Robbie walks around outside drunk until he is eventually killed off, and then when Sydney makes it to the house, the final chase scene begins. With Sydney eventually ending up with Kirby in order to see Charlie bound to a chair out on the patio, similar to Casey's boyfriend from the original, and with Ghostface asking Kirby a bunch of horror movie questions over the phone in order to save his life. But this time, unlike the original, Kirby knows her shit, and she gets every question right, eventually listing off just about every horror movie remake that was made within the last 10 years.
Horror movie in which the villain...
Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Dawn of the Dead, The Hills Have Eyes, Amityville Horror.
Unfortunately, even though she passes Ghostface quiz and is able to rescue Charlie, turns out Charlie was the second killer all along and stabs Kirby in the gut. Now, Kirby does survive this, but her fate in this movie is left ambiguous. This is the last time that we'll see her in the film, and we just kind of assume that she died. Hell, this looks like even more of a definitive death than a TV falling on someone's head. This is a huge knife going into her gut. But years later in Scream 6, Kirby does return, so somehow she is not killed here. Watching the movie back, it stands to reason that Charlie was the killer in most of the film. Even though Jill is wearing the Ghostface costume for her reveal, Jill was often present while Ghostface was attacking, and in the reveal scene, it feels very much like she fully manipulated Charlie into being her errand boy, probably being the only girl to show him affection after he could never get Kirby's attention, but it was all part of Jill's plan. She is the mastermind here. So she does away with Charlie the moment he's not needed anymore, stabbing him in the heart. I don't know if that's to say that he got his heart broken, but yeah, he was definitely the grunt here. But now I do have to talk about Jill as the killer because I just adore her. The way that Emma portrays her insanity and desire for fame and attention is absolutely perfect. So the motivation here is that being Sydney's cousin, she always hated Sydney for being in the spotlight because of her past and being the center of attention for being a sole survivor of these murders. So she wanted to stage an event that made her the sole survivor so that she would become famous, wealthy, and popular due to this event. As she states, she wants fans, not friends. And again, this is eerily reminiscent of how a lot of people are on the internet and social media. They will do the most extreme, depraved, and unempathetic things in order to gather as many eyeballs on them as possible. They don't care about if they're a good person, they just care about the views. It's the streaming effect. All the murders here were filmed with the intent to upload them, and she would be faking her story to the world and ride that fame so that she would never have to work a day in her life. That kind of hollow existence and parasocial relationship that so many streamers have without any kind of care of what they do to others as long as they're being provocative and getting attention. And again, this was in 2011, just shortly before streaming became huge and internet celebrities became the norm. Jill was right on the money, and along with how batshit crazy she acts, like when she's beating the crap out of herself to fake her injuries, to me, her motivations make sense and are scarily similar to what we see online today. And because of that and her performance, it puts Jill towards the top of the Ghostface killers for me. Not as great as Billy and Stu for their iconic status, but she is a strong number 3 for me in the long line of Ghostface killers. To remake the original, she was going to blame her ex-boyfriend along with Charlie as kind of the new Billy and Stu, and so she kills him as well. And she leaves Sydney for dead after stabbing her a second time. And now I guess the original idea for the ending of this movie was going to be different. I've heard different things here and there, but the only thing that I really got to work with is that in the commentary, Wes Craven says there were a lot of rewrites on the script, especially for the opening and ending scenes, and even Wes Craven wrote some scenes for this movie. So take this with a grain of salt, but I guess the original version was going to have the ending be more of a cliffhanger, where Jill was going to be helped out of the house, and then they mentioned that somebody is still alive, but you didn't know if it was going to be Sydney or Kirby, which would have added its own mystery as well as being the only Scream movie where a killer survived to the end. But it was scrapped for a more traditional and definitive ending. The ending we do get takes place at the hospital, after Dewey visits Jill and mentions that Sidney is still alive in the ICU. I love Jill's panic, like, ah, fuck, I gotta go finish this. And I also do like that the final scene happens here. Hospitals are creepy in general, and it goes along with the remake theme of doing something different that you wouldn't expect. Normally, the big killer monologue scene is the ending. And here we get a chance for Sidney, Dewey, and Gale, and even Judy, to all arrive on the scene and try to stop Jill. Jill grabs the gun and gets the upper hand for a while, until Sidney is able to shock her with a defibrillator, and then deliver the finishing blow with the gun, thus ending Jill's incredible story as a heroic survivor in only a few hours. Scream 4 can seem like an unnecessary revival, but I can't help but really enjoy this movie. Maybe it was the long break after part 3 and just being happy to see these characters again, but I think this movie is really damn good. It's not perfect, there's still some ill-placed humor that doesn't work for me, and again, it doesn't dare kill any of its legacy characters, and a lot of people end up surviving when they probably shouldn't. But this is the most interesting rendition of Ghostface since the first movie for me, and I'm so happy that the motivation isn't just revenge, because that gets played out, and instead, it's something more creative and predictive of the times that we're actually living in now. I enjoy the commentary on the detached nature of the internet fame and the lengths that people will go for it. I think the kills here are pretty good and way more gory than the last few movies. I enjoy the younger cast and their interactions together quite a bit, and I think they told a good story for the returning characters of Sidney, Dewey, and Gale. I know some people don't like Part 4, but I think this movie is pretty solid. But, unfortunately, Scream 4 would not just be Wes Craven's last Scream movie, but it would be the final film he would ever make. 4 years later, in 2015, Wes Craven sadly passed away due to a brain tumor, and the world of horror has been lessened ever since without him. Wes Craven was always one of my favorite directors and inspirations, and though not every film he made was great, his contributions to the genre and his insight into the psychology of deranged characters cannot be understated. Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, Serpent and the Rainbow, People Under the Stairs, obviously Nightmare on Elm Street, and for the purpose of this video, the Scream franchise. None of it would be what it is today without him. He stuck with the franchise for 4 movies and brought Ghostface, yet another icon of horror cinema, into our lives, and one that will stay here forever. Thank you, Wes Craven, for all that you have done, your creativity, and your collaborations. To this day, you are deeply missed, and Scream will never be the same without you.
If you want something on your gravestone in the film business, I think the best thing is filmmaker. If you can honestly say that, that's all you need to say. And that I think I would like that on my gravestone, along with whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Well, I guess I can't have a snack break, but now we're going to take a little detour into the other media of the Scream franchise. Places where Ghostface has shown up, from video games to TV projects, and of course the original Scream that no one gives a shit about. Basically, now's the time to grab a snack for yourself as we tackle some outside media of the Scream series.
To start this segment off, I guess it's probably the most important thing that I mention There was a Scream TV series that originally premiered in 2015, and it lasted a total of 3 seasons and 30 episodes. But the third season is disconnected from the first 2, having a different main character and setting, and it was given the subtitle Scream Resurrection. And, you know, anytime that you add resurrection to the title of a franchise, it's gonna be a good time.
This here's a reboot, and reboots don't play by your rules.
But despite there being a few references and homages to the films, as well as a mentioning of the Stab movies, the TV series is not within the same continuity as the film universe. They are 2 separate entities. The first 2 seasons also use an entirely different Ghostface mask for their killer, which some sources say was a creative decision, while others say it was literally because they couldn't pay for the rights to the OG mask. Whatever the case, it really does make it look like an MTV version of Ghostface. Oh wait, the show actually aired on MTV. But they did go back to using the traditional mask in the 3rd season for whatever that's worth. Now I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys and say I did not watch the Scream TV series. I debated on it for a while because with these retrospectives, I do like to cover everything I can find in the franchise, and with other series like The Evil Dead and Chucky, I extensively covered their TV series episode by episode. But the major difference there is that both of those TV shows are direct continuations of the movies. They're within the same continuity. The Scream TV series bears no connection with the films other than the title and the fact that it's about a slasher that wears a mask. So in order to try to actually get this video finished and uploaded before the summer ends, I figured it would be better not to have to sit through 30 episodes of a TV show that I didn't really care about to begin with when I really just wanted to focus on the movies, because that's what I'm a fan of. I also skipped the Friday the 13th TV series when I covered that franchise, but that show is literally only connected by name. The Scream show is at least actually about a mystery slasher, so it's a lot closer to the source material, but 30 episodes would be way more of a time investment than even the movies themselves. I also figure most people that are interested in this video are probably here for the movies, and so spending an extra 2 hours of this already long video focusing on the show, most people would probably just skip it in the timestamps anyway. But if you are a fan of this show, let me know down in the comments what you like about it, or if you find it to be some kind of underrated gem of sorts. Let me know if you think more people should check it out. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and if you think I'm truly missing out on something. If I hear enough good reception for it, maybe at some point I'll give it a go, but I figured I would keep this video a little bit more focused on the movies. But just so you guys are aware, yes, there is a Scream television series that lasted from 2015 to 2019, 3 seasons, 2 connected, 1 on its own, makes it sort of like an anthology. I have heard mixed things here or there, and there are currently various options to rent it on streaming from Amazon to Fandango if you guys want to check it out. However, even though I didn't watch the Scream TV show, I did watch something else that I deeply regret. It's called Scream from 1981. Yes, there was actually a slasher horror film called Scream that was released 15 years before the more traditionally famous Wes Craven film. It has no relation to the 96 Scream. 96 Scream was not a remake of this in any way, shape, or form, but it is a slasher movie. One of the worst slasher movies that I have ever seen in my life. And I don't mean bad as in like a fun, campy, cheesy, low-budget way. It's not bad in the way that Sleepaway Camp or Pieces is bad. No, I love those movies. The 1981 Scream is literally one of the most boring, sorry excuses for a horror film that I have ever seen, and I can't think of one redeeming factor about it. I'm serious.
I don't take that kind of lip from anybody, let alone from any damn female.
This female sure as hell isn't going to take it from you.
It's about a group of hikers that stumble upon an abandoned town and they camp there for a few nights as an unseen killer picks them off one by one. But not only do you never see the killer, You only really see one kill on screen the entire movie. Most of the kills are off-screen cutaways, or they just find the body later. There's barely any blood in this movie other than just little drips that they find here and there, and it feels like they did everything that they could to just pad out the runtime and do nothing for as long as possible to save budget. All the characters are shit and disposable, and it's hard to take anything seriously when one of them wears a cowboy hat for the entire film, and most of the movie is ADR'd where the voices don't even match up to the mouths.
No, please, no, stop.
So much of this movie is just BS conversations that go on and on and on and never result in anything just to pad out the runtime. There's slow pans of empty buildings at night to try to be spooky, which doesn't work, and then they find a dead body in the morning. There's only one scene where someone gets an axe in their face and you barely see it, and then you do see some blood on a sickle later on. It's terrible. I do not recommend it. It's not even so bad that it's good. But if you do find yourself curious about the first Scream movie, it is currently on Tubi for free, but you've been warned. All I can say is thank God there was no legal issues with using the name Scream, because then we actually got to have a good horror movie with the title at some point in the future. In the wake of Scream, another very important adjacent entry is, of course, Scary Movie.
Where am I?
You're behind the couch.
What?
I can see your feet.
Released in 2000, developed by the Wayans brothers, Scary Movie, which of course was the original title of Scream before it was changed, it doesn't just parody horror movies, but it specifically parodies Scream down to the characters, the dynamics, the plot structure, and even scene-by-scene recreations. Yes, there's plenty of references to other horror movies of the time too, like I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Blair Witch Project, but most of this movie is literally just a comedy version of Scream. From the opening kill scene to having the main character named Cindy instead of Sydney, her boyfriend Bobby instead of Billy, they recreate the bedroom scene, they recreate the high school water fountain scene, the end party at the killer's house, the kitchen reveal scene, it's all here. The whole movie is beat for beat Scream, but with some of the most absurd and perverted humor inserted into it. There's also a ton of comedy in this movie that probably would not fly in today's age. There's fat jokes, gay jokes, mentally disabled jokes. All of the classic era of comedy staples are here that we no longer see. The Dewey spoof is literally a character named Officer Doofy who is mentally challenged and has sex with his vacuum cleaner. But technically it's all an act because in a reference to The Usual Suspects, Doofy was just pretending the entire time, and he was the real killer of this movie all along. There's also a scene that spoofs the Budweiser What's Up commercials, which anybody watching Scary Movie in 2025 will probably have no idea what's going on here.
What's up? What's up? What's up?
Believe it or not, back in the early 2000s, you could not go a single day without somebody screaming, "What's up?" It was just a thing. It was everywhere. And rewatching this movie now, it really takes me back to a simpler time. What do I think about Scary Movie? It is a great horror comedy, and I think it's a perfect addition to watch alongside Scream. If you love Scream, then this movie is definitely a guilty pleasure. Maybe the last great spoof movie before the entire genre spiraled into oblivion. Scary Movie itself spawned its own line of sequels, but each one changed the type of movies that they referenced, like Scary Movie 2 focused more on ghost and supernatural horror. And after the second one, the Wayans brothers left, and the humor became more PG-13 than it was before and never quite hit the same peaks, although Scary Movie 3 is okay. But it also ventured into spoofing non-horror movies like War of the Worlds, which felt like it kind of went away from what the original established. And of course, from there, there's all the tangent spoof movies like epic movies, superhero movie, date movie, the list goes on. But there could be hope on the horizon, because currently, a Scary Movie 6 is in development, with the Wayans brothers returning for the first time since Part 2. So I hope they have something good in store for us that takes us back to the style of the original.
Do you know what they do to young boys in prison? You know, those sex-starved convicts just waiting for a fresh piece of meat?
Hey, you're right, Cindy. Maybe we should call the police.
There was also a direct-to-video scary movie knockoff called Shriek If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th, which is not nearly as good or memorable as Scary Movie, but it also follows the Scream template to a T and uses the same recycled formula once again. There's a few good laughs to be had here, but it's mostly forgettable.
Somehow, the killer always knows where we are.
In the realm of books and novels, I was shocked to find that there is not any official novelizations of the movies, at least that I could find. You can get scripts and books that were written by fans, and even a book series called Scream that's not associated with the movies whatsoever, but no official sources of available novelizations that I could find. I don't know, maybe I'm just missing them. And also, no comic books, which is incredibly surprising to me, because almost every major slasher horror icon has gotten at least one limited run of comic books at some point. I mean, even Leprechaun has a comic, but Ghostface doesn't? That is just wild to me. It's certainly popular enough, and there's plenty of different angles that you could take the comics. You could just do adaptations, continuations, you could make original stories. Hell, you could even make the Stab movies into a comic book. But none of this has been done so far, and I just can't imagine why. Then in the realm of video games, the first official Ghostface appearance was in 2011 for promotion for Scream 4 in a mobile game. It's no longer available, so I couldn't play it for myself, but it looks like it was pooped out very quickly just to have a movie tie-in game for your phone where you swipe the screen to slash people. I guess it works. Ghostface then appeared in Dead by Daylight in 2016, a survival horror game where you have characters that you can try to run and survive from, or you can play as the killer themselves, and Ghostface was a very welcome addition to this franchise. He fits right in, and most people were pretty excited about it. But whereas a horror game like Dead by Daylight makes perfect sense for Ghostface, his next appearance is a pretty interesting WTF moment because he showed up in Call of Duty. Yeah, you know, Black Ops, Warzone, totally the kind of game I would imagine a horror icon like Ghostface showing up in. I guess if you really want to see Ghostface with a gun, there you go. So the Ghostface skin was available there and also became available in more out-of-the-box collaborations like a game called Naughty Bear Panic in Paradise where you dress up as a teddy bear and go on serial killer-like rampages and do some stabbing. Also, a Ghostface skin appeared in Among Us. Yes, that was a thing. Does anybody still play that anymore? It's been a while since I've seen anyone talk about it, but at one point in time, it was all over the internet. You couldn't escape. Now, there's also a couple fan-created games that exist revolving around Scream and Ghostface, but the most famous has to be Terrordrome, a fan-created project doing what I always wanted to see, making a Mortal Kombat-style fighting game that included a roster of all slasher and horror movie characters. Jason, Michael, Leatherface, and of course, Ghostface had also been included. But then in 2024, as a DLC, they added Ghostface to Mortal Kombat 1, and it is glorious. As a huge Mortal Kombat fan myself, as well as being a horror and Scream fan, I love when the franchise adds in horror characters like they had in the past, and with Ghostface, they did some serious justice to him here, giving him a great skill and moveset, voiced authentically by Roger Jackson, giving him some really fantastic interactions with specific characters.
In Crom's name, I will punish you.
I'm gonna crom my knife up your ass.
And technically, the Ghostface chosen for the game is Billy Loomis, with some occasional references to Stu as well.
That you, Billy? Of course it is, Stu.
The attacks and movesets are great, as well as the brutalities and fatalities. I don't have any complaints about this. The only thing I wish is that Mortal Kombat had all of their horror characters in one game completely. But hey, I don't mind seeing Ghostface beat the shit out of Shang Tsung any day of the week.
What? Oh, come on! This is bullshit! He's a dude with a knife!
Fatality.
For music based on the franchise, there's not a lot, and there's not really any original song made for the movie, but the song Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds is featured in every Scream film and has since become associated with the series. It would be weird to see a movie without this song playing at least in one scene. Outside of that, the band Ice Nine Kills on their album The Silver Scream, which is a concept album where every song is based on a horror movie, they did feature a Scream-centric song called Your Number's Up. And there's been plenty of parody and comedy versions of songs based around Scream, and even an unofficial musical parody of the film called Screamed, which is performed live in Las Vegas. When it comes to Scream ripoff films, it's a little bit more complicated to consider what actually counts as a ripoff, because a slasher movie with a mystery killer wasn't a brand new concept when Scream did it. They just did it the best. It was the style, the self-aware nature of Scream. It was that new wave of slasher cinema coming back into the mainstream. New hot young actors in the lead roles that the MTV era would promote, and a lot of them focused on being more of a thriller. For example, some people do consider I Know What You Did Last Summer as a sort of Scream ripoff, coming out the following year and having a similar tone. And in its wake, there were plenty of films that felt the exact same. You had Urban Legend after that, and you had the movie Valentine. The movie The Faculty, which I love, was written by Kevin Williamson, which did to the alien invasion genre as Scream did for slashers. Hell, even the OG of slashers returned, Michael Myers in Halloween H2O, which is another movie that I love, but I admit it definitely feels more similar to a Scream movie than it does the original Halloween. And basically it was made not just because of the 20th anniversary of the original Halloween, but because Scream had allowed slashers to make a massive comeback and they saw the opportunity. There's also a bunch of Scream fan films online, Scream Return, Scream Legacy. It's pretty endless if you want to look for them. But to be fair, making a Scream fan film seems like a good pick to go with. All you need is a Ghostface costume, which is extremely easy to come by, and some people that are willing to pretend to get killed. I feel like maybe I should make one myself. There's also been no shortage of Scream references with parodies in TV shows.
Aw, where the hell's my sweater?
Chill out. It's in the dryer.
You fool! The label clearly says permanent press.
Alongside that, there is, of course, the Scream porn parody, which actually stays consistent in the meta storytelling, believe it or not, because the parody itself is about people making a Scream porn parody while real murders start to happen on the set.
I know you like dirty movies.
I do, huh?
Now, in the 2-hour runtime of this movie, yes, it's 2 hours, that I only watched for research purposes and nothing more, there's only about 12 minutes of actual story. The rest is just, well, what you would expect. And they don't bother putting any effort into the kills. They all happen off screen, they're all cutaways, and then it goes back to the banging. And of course, Ron Jeremy shows up in a cameo. And in the killer reveal scene, it shows that one of the characters actually had a twin, they were doing the killings together, and their motivation was to try to stop all of these porn parodies being made.
Right. Motivation. It's the fucking parodies.
What?
Would I recommend this? No. No, I would not. But that'll about do it for this segment of the video, you guys. Thanks for watching this. Those are some references and situations where Ghostface and Scream has shown up in some other media beyond the films, but with that out of the way, let's continue back to the reviews themselves.
Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed that little detour we had. Now it's time to get back to the films themselves, and we have to talk about the new era of Scream 5 and 6. This is when Scream returned to theater, shocking everybody that these films could still be made, and also the fact that there was no remake to be found, but instead a continuation of what we've already known, introducing new characters while also having returning fan favorites. This is an interesting era of Scream to talk about, and I'm very excited to get into it with all of you. Now, before we begin— What the—
Yeah, take that, you son of a bitch.
So after Scream 4 in 2011, there would be yet another 11-year gap in between movies, and so much would change within that same time. Wes Craven passing away in 2015, and the studio that financed and produced all of the Scream movies thus far closing up shop due to, well, one of the founders, Harvey Weinstein, being arrested for numerous accounts of sexual assault and harassment. It was a pretty big deal. thus bankrupting and closing down the Weinstein Company in the year 2018. So, the rights to Scream were available, and the franchise was bought by Spyglass Media Group, and they wanted to revitalize the series once again, bringing Scream back for a 5th installment. But shockingly enough, they were not deciding to remake the first film. Instead, they wanted to continue the story while also introducing a new cast of main characters, and trying to make the film seem modern with still plenty of callbacks to the originals. By this point in time in horror, we were getting into what has since been coined the elevated horror era. I don't really like the name of that subgenre at all, but it includes films like The Babadook, The Witch, and Hereditary. Slower, more methodical films dripping with atmosphere and mostly focusing on its characters dealing with heavy real-life issues like grief, depression, and turmoil within their own darkness. Movies that had one foot still firmly planted in the horror genre, but were also able to be taken seriously by critics and also the, let's say, more snobby side of the film community. By the way, I like a number of these films, especially Hereditary, one of my all-time favorites, but all of them are as far and away from the traditional slasher film as you could possibly get. I enjoy a deep psychological character study, sure, but I also enjoy watching people get the shit stabbed out of them for 90 minutes by a masked killer. On top of that, we also had the return of major established horror franchises like Halloween in Halloween 2018, bringing back Laurie Strode once again in yet another tangent timeline. Thankfully, Scream would stay within its core timeline and continuity, but it would comment and poke fun at the idea of elevated horror, while also becoming what the film calls a requel, which again isn't a term that I particularly like. I've also heard it called legacy sequels, but it breaks down like this.
It's got to be part of an ongoing storyline. New main characters, yes, but supported by and related to legacy characters.
It's a movie that's still within continuity of its established series, but it has a new main cast and starts a brand new story, but still allows itself to have ties to the pre-existing movies and often features long-running characters now in supporting roles in order to kind of pass the torch to the newer cast. So even though it is still technically a sequel, it can work as the first movie for a new generation. They did it with Halloween 2018, Texas Chainsaw, Star Wars, Rocky with Creed, Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park, so on and so forth. It's a very popular trend right now, for better or usually for worse. It's a way to bring back recognizable IPs so that people will go see it because they know the name of the films, but also lock in a new generation of younger fans. Now, there are some good examples of this being pulled off well, and I do think Creed is probably the best example of that. This actually legitimately works as a continuation of the Rocky franchise and as the beginning of a new era, but I think very few films can actually pull this off well. I consider Creed to kind of be the exception to the rule. Most of the time, I don't like this approach because I would just rather see a sequel actually about the main characters and see them being older. I don't see why just because they're older now that there isn't still stories to tell. And I hate seeing the main cast be pushed back into small supporting roles after they've carried the series for so long. Just because they're older doesn't mean they can't still be interesting. That aside, when it comes to Scream 5, that they just called Scream, which is so stupid, but I'll chalk it up to part of the meta commentary of following in the footsteps of Halloween 2018, which just called itself Halloween. But it still pisses me off a little bit because all of the other Scream sequels have numbering, and everyone just calls it Scream 5 anyway. But I do think despite all odds, Scream 5 turned out kinda decent. It's not great, but it's also not a total train wreck. And I think a large part of that is the creative team behind it, as well as a massive amount of young, talented actors who were actually really excited to be in a Scream movie after growing up with the series. They felt about Scream the same way that Kevin Williamson felt about slashers when he wrote the original. Now, Kevin Williamson did not write this one, but he was one of the executive producers. Instead, it was written by Guy Busick and James Vanderbilt, the latter of which wrote the script for the movie Zodiac, which is really good, and it would have two directors. Matt Bettolidi-Olpin, and Tyler Gillette. They had previously collaborated on the movie Ready or Not in 2019, which was pretty good, and Scream was going to be their next project. Both of them expressing how important the franchise was to them and how big Wes Craven was to be one of their filmmaking inspirations. They dedicated the movie to Wes Craven in the credits, and they even had a character named Wes in the film who is killed. But then the final act features a party that celebrates the life of Wes, and it's kind of meant as a meta tribute. The film takes place in Woodsboro yet again, 11 years after the events of Scream 4, and the opening sequence is what you would expect at first, mimicking the opening of the original, but in a modern context. It features smartphones, texting, and modern security locks on the house. But that doesn't stop the new Ghostface from calling the landline, as well as using the stolen smartphone to send live video footage of them outside of the victim's friend's house, threatening to kill them if she calls the police. The she in question is named Tara Carpenter, and she's played by Jenna Ortega, and this is just shortly before she would become super famous from the Wednesday TV show. Also, her friend on the video that is being threatened is Amber, who is played by Mickey Madison, who just a few years later would win an Academy Award for Best Actress in the movie Anora. I didn't watch Anora because I'm too busy watching the 5th installment in a slasher franchise, but Mickey Madison would make history in being the first Ghostface killer to win an Oscar. Yes, she is going to be one of the killers revealed at the end of the film, along with her partner Richie, which is played by Jack Quaid, who takes the honor of being the first Ghostface killer to be tied up in a superhero sex dungeon in The Boys. Yeah, I don't know. This opening scene is very well done, though. I think it has great progression into the horror with the phone conversation starting out simple and pleasant, Ghostface pretending to be one of her mom's friends, and then they get into the topic of horror movies and things slowly get stranger.
It's a girl at home, alone. She answers a wrong number and starts talking with the killer, who makes her play a game.
Tara is depicted as the character who prefers the more modern, prestigious, artsy horror films, the elevated horror.
That sounds kind of boring to me. Have you ever seen Stab?
Saying The Babadook is her favorite movie, whereas the killer on the phone is specifically obsessed with the Stab movies. The added element of the smartphone video footage works as a way for her not just to call the cops, and the frantic panicking of her trying to use her phone to activate the security system also works for the added suspense. But the most interesting thing about this opening sequence is, despite Tara being stabbed multiple times, is that she doesn't die. This is the first Scream opening where the victim lives. And sure, it's for a specific purpose, to lure Tara's sister, Samantha, to town, but I actually like that as a twist. It's something I would never expect from a Scream movie. The opening victim lives? Good job. So similar to Scream 4, this movie has a new cast of younger teen characters. I do think the Scream 4 cast was more interesting, but they all got killed, so we kind of have to start over. Well, with the exception of Kirby, although she is never mentioned in this movie, unless you freeze frame Richie's laptop screen in which you can see a suggested video that is an interview with survivor Kirby Reed. I never caught this myself when I first watched it, and I had to have this pointed out to me. But yeah, it looks like technically they did confirm that she survived in Scream 5. We just won't see her until the next movie. The new cast here also mostly all have ties to former Scream characters. Enough time has passed now that new generations have had a chance to grow up. For example, the character Wes, mentioned earlier, is actually the son of Judy from Scream 4, who has now become the sheriff of Woodsboro. Kyle Gallner is here, who shows up in a bunch of horror movies, and he plays a punk bad boy type character named Vince that is stated to be the nephew of Stu Macher. So I guess Stu had a sibling that we never knew about. Speaking of siblings, remember how they suddenly introduced Randy's sister in a single scene in Scream 3? Well, she's back, and she has children now, Mindy and Chad. Mindy taking on more of the Randy-esque role of the knowledgeable movie nerd to give us various breakdowns, and Chad kind of going against the grain, being more the typical jock character. The rest of the friend group, we have Chad's girlfriend Liv, as well as Amber, who would turn out to be one of the killers, and both of these girls don't seem to have any connection to previous characters, other than Amber somehow lucking out to live in Stu's old house. And finally, our main character is Samantha Carpenter, played by Melissa Barrera. She's the sister of Tara, who was attacked in the beginning, but they're only half siblings. A major family secret kept from both of them until Sam eventually found her mother's old diary is that she has a different father than Tara does. A dad who turned out to be Billy Loomis. So, I guess the entire time Billy was trying to have sex with Sydney, he actually did have sex with someone else. A little too successfully. Sam was supposedly born just a year after the first murders in 1997, making her about 25 years old in this movie. After finding out her real father was a serial killer and her mother had been lying to her entire life, she became a troubled youth and eventually left Woodsboro for good, returning now only after hearing news that Tara was attacked in the hospital, being driven to town by her totally unassuming and caring boyfriend Richie, aka the second killer. In order to try to figure out who the killer is, Sam and Richie head to the home of a longtime favorite character, Dewey. And this is where I'm kind of conflicted. Similar to the real lives of the actors themselves, it seems like Dewey and Gale ultimately did not stay together. Gale took a job being the host of a morning news show, and Dewey, unable to handle the intensity of city life, came back to Woodsboro. He is now no longer a sheriff, no longer married, and is depicted to be a reclusive drunk. Yeesh. Now I can understand for story purposes to start him off this way, but unfortunately nothing with him is resolved by the end of his time in the movie. Dewey is shown at first standoffish, and I do like that he suspects Richie right away, like he absolutely nails it. And I like the full bearded kind of grizzled depiction of him, a version of Dewey that is so fed up with this shit that he doesn't have time to mess around. But he's still also a kind-hearted person and protective, which is why he decides to help Sam, as well as the reason why he calls Sydney to warn her just in case. When he calls Sydney, we learn that she has since found somebody to marry herself and has had a child. We don't get to see either of them in the movie, but it's great to see that she met someone she can trust and has been able to live a normal life, at least for about a decade. Now, I also want to say that I think this version of Dewey would have made more sense if they had actually committed to killing Gale in Scream 4. If she had died at the barn as Dewey got there, or maybe shortly after, this would lead to a good reason for Dewey to be this kind of depressive drunk living alone, and somebody that could no longer handle the stress of the job of being sheriff, which is why he's no longer working there. But the fact that they decided to have Dewey's life end up like this, while Gale is also out there being successful, and it seems like Sydney is able to have a normal life, it just makes me really sad for the character, and even worse with the continuation of him in this movie. Because I gotta jump forward and talk about my biggest gripe. So, Scream 5 is the movie where they finally do decide to kill off one of the core 3 characters of this franchise, and it is Dewey. I'm not against this as an idea in general. I just hate how it was done. I hate that we have to have Dewey and Gale broken up and Dewey living in this depressive rut after everything that had happened. Again, this would have made more sense if they had killed Gale in the 4th movie, because he would feel like he has no more reason to live. But it just feels like they left Dewey in the dumps. He only gets one scene with Gale in the movie, and they don't even really reconcile or get back together. And I get that it might be hard for the actors considering they did divorce in real life, and maybe that was the point as well for the movie, since the character relationship seems to mimic their real life one, but it is such a bummer that this is their only scene together, and Dewey doesn't even get a chance to have a scene with Sydney, just one short phone call. Ghostface attacks Tara again at the hospital, and in this scene we see Richie right there with Dewey and Sam, so this Ghostface has to be Amber. Dewey shoots the Amber Ghostface like 4 times in the chest, and even though she's wearing a bulletproof vest, she gets up instantly with no drawbacks in her attacks whatsoever. Dewey here is seen struggling to hold her back, and okay, I get that Dewey is older. He'd be around 51 since they say he was 25 in the first film. He's got nerve damage and past injuries. He's been drinking a lot. I understand all that, but I still imagine he would be well stronger than Amber simply due to his physicality and all the years that he had as a cop trained to take people down. It's hard for me to just buy the fact that she would have the strength and capability to overpower him and gut him like is shown here. But even all of that aside, it still bums me out that Dewey leaves this franchise in this state. Divorced, alone, unemployed, and to Amber of all people. I still think the best spot to have killed Dewey would have been in Scream 2. It would have been tragic for him and Gale to never fully get together, but I think what we got in Scream 5 is far more tragic. I also understand that these three characters have made it out alive too many times at this point. It's Scream 5 now, and at least one of them has to die. I get that. They probably figured Sidney would be off limits, and then it came down to Dewey or Gale, and they went with Dewey. I understand one of them had to go to raise the stakes, but I just hate how it happened and how Dewey's life turned out so sad before it did. I also think Dewey would be smart enough to shoot them in the head immediately at this point, so all of the body shots that he did, it's like he learned nothing from Scream 3. And the final thing I'm going to say about it is if they still wanted to kill Dewey, it might have been more interesting for him to take Amber out with him, or at least discover her identity. Like, if he were able to get a shot off after he had been stabbed, or rip the mask off. Imagine if he had killed her, and they think it's over, and they didn't realize there was a second killer, and Richie could just take over in the final act. That way, even though Dewey did die, it wasn't fully in vain, and he could set up the second killer reveal. But anyways, that's my little soapbox about that. But Dewey is not the only returning character to die. Shortly before this, Ghostface also takes out Judy from Scream 4, as well as her son Wes. It's a double family kill. There's also a huge component of Sam's character that I need to mention. Not only is she Billy's biological daughter, but she also happens to see visions of Billy whenever she's stressed out. And Skeet Ulrich is actually here reprising his role as the character.
Antipsychotics aren't working as well as they used to, are they?
Fuck you.
It's fantastic to see him back again, even though they did do some weird de-aging stuff that doesn't look quite right, but his mannerisms are exactly like they were in the original. It's not really stated what's going on with Sam other than just her own trauma manifesting itself. I know they did go a little crazy with Sidney's dream sequences in Scream 3, but nothing supernatural has ever really happened in these movies. So Sam seeing Billy in her mind, I assume, is meant to be mostly just part of her not wanting to face that true part of her past. A memory that she tries to bury, but a memory that is the catalyst for the entire film. She can't deny her own lineage. Eventually, Sidney does show up to Woodsboro an hour into the film, and she meets up with Gale. By this point, she really does feel kind of like an afterthought, which is a bummer. Her presence in the third act is great, but the story of the movie feels like it didn't really need her here, like as if she didn't want to come back, they could have just rode around it. There's also a brief scene of Sidney meeting Sam, which also is kind of disappointing because they don't really interact that much at all in this movie. Sure, they're forced to be together at the finale when they're facing off the killers, but as far as interacting and getting to know one another, they don't. And it just feels kind of like a missed opportunity to have the lead character of the Scream franchise thus far have more interaction with who they're setting up to be the new lead character. If there was going to be any passing of the torch kind of moment, they don't really have any moments of them bonding or forming any kind of connection to make that a smooth transition. And that's kind of where I falter with legacy sequels in general. I just hate seeing great characters have to take a back seat for new ones. That being said, I do think that Sam is a good character, and she carries the movie very well on her shoulders. Melissa Barrera is a fantastic actress, and I always get excited to see her in just about anything. Scream 5 was the first movie I ever saw her in, and she did blow me away. So the finale of the movie takes place at a party in Stu's house, kind of mimicking the original, and this party is of course dedicated to their friend, Wes. Sam had planned on leaving town with Richie and Tara, but Richie hides Tara's inhaler, forcing them to need to stop at Amber's first. Meanwhile, Sidney has placed a tracker on Sam's car so that her and Gale can follow them and face the killer head on. At the party, Liv wants to get it on with Chad, but he's still a little too suspicious of her possibly being a killer and causes them to have a fight. When he goes outside to look for her, he's attacked by Ghostface and gets stabbed like 5 times. Jeez. With all that stabbing, it's unlikely he'll survive. Oh, but he does survive. Well, that's okay. I'm sure he won't survive multiple stab wounds all at once 2 movies in a row, because that would be crazy. Right? Most of the party departs, leaving just our core cast, and after Mindy is attacked, each of them argue about who the killer may be, until Amber just decides to pull a gun out and shoots Liv in the face.
I'm not the fucking killer!
I know.
Which is honestly a pretty great and darkly hilarious reveal. I also love how when Sidney and Gale show up, Amber stumbles outside like she's hurt, and neither of them buy it.
What do you think? Trap.
Gale is shot but still alive, and Sidney explores the house in a similar way that Dewey did in the original, but she shoots every closed door as she passes it, which is a good call. Yet another great moment is when Ghostface calls her during this scene, and during the phone call itself, she just states that she's bored and hangs up.
Surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
Although she does manage to shoot Richie in the leg through one of the doors, Amber attacks dressed as Ghostface, and eventually Amber and Richie corner Sidney and Sam in the kitchen. And their motivations here are to inspire another Stab sequel. So they met online, both being fans of the series Stab, and are disappointed in the direction that it's taken. There's actually a lot of talk about how Stab 8 ruined the series, also meaning since 2011, only one Stab movie has been released, since they were at 7 back at that point. Stab 8, similar to the movie we're watching now, dropped the numbering and just called itself Stab. It wasn't connected to the other Stab movies, it didn't feature Sidney as a character, and it redesigned Ghostface along with giving him a flamethrower. Honestly, I wish we saw more clips of Stab 8 because this looks awesome. Also in-universe, Stab 8 was apparently directed by Rian Johnson, which might be kind of a meta joke because of his controversial Star Wars movie The Last Jedi that divided an entire fandom. But Richie and Amber hated this movie, and they want Stab to go back to its roots, so they staged their own murders for the movies to take inspiration from, planning to make it look like Sam was the killer, following in her father's footsteps. It's kind of a messy motivation because there's no certainty filmmakers would want to follow this story at all. Wouldn't you want to be threatening people that are in charge of making movies, like producers or directors or something? And it also makes the ending feel kind of bland compared to the rest of the movie, because the movie is filled with interesting twists and turns on the formula. The opening victim surviving, actually killing one of the original 3 leads, giving us the revelation that Sam is Billy's daughter, and for all the standard fare of the Ghostface phone calls and kill scenes, they were all done pretty good. But the monologuing kitchen scene has been done 3 times now, and I think Scream 4 did a much better tribute to the original than 5 does. Also, neither of these 2 killers feel like they're masterminds. Amber has already shown that she doesn't really have the patience for much of this, and if Richie hadn't gotten Sam to date him, none of this would have worked in the first place, so that's a huge stroke of luck, and also he seems a little too erratic to have planned things out. Billy and Stu really complemented each other, and in a way, so did the killers from Scream 4. But both killers here just seem like lunatics that wouldn't have been able to plan this out as delicately as they did. I also think their motivation is pretty damn ridiculous. Anyways, they forget to account for Tara, who distracts them long enough for Sidney and Sam to fight back. Sam goes after Richie, while Sidney and Gale face down Amber. Sidney allowing Gale to finish her off for vengeance or Dewey, and not only does she shoot Amber, but Amber catches on fire thanks to being drenched in hand sanitizer earlier. And this would make 2 movies in a row where Mikey Madison is a maniac killer lit on fire. This and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Sam also manages to get a knife and kill Richie pretty brutally, stabbing him multiple times. Her father would be proud, slits his throat, and then ironically wipes the knife off the exact same way that her father would have. Tara does finish off Amber as she runs in for a final strike, which, damn, Tara's accuracy for shooting is crazy considering Amber was running full sprint at the time, and I have no idea if Tara has ever used a gun before, but that's extremely impressive. Yeah, no shock that I find the ending of this movie to be pretty lackluster. As the film wraps up, it's revealed that both Chad and Mindy are still alive and will survive to the next movie, and Gale declares that she is not going to write any books on this event to not give the killers any notoriety. So it ends with Sidney, Gale, Sam, and Tara all going their separate ways. I don't think Scream 5 is a bad movie at all. It has great tension and kills, and a really good cast of new characters that do a fantastic job. Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega are both phenomenal in their roles, and they bring a lot to this series. I was very hesitant about this movie when it came out, mostly due to the absence of Wes Craven. Sure, horror sequels have different directors all the time, but Scream was an exception. It was the same director and same cast every time. It set the series apart from all the others. But I do think that this was a very well-made movie, and these directors have shown themselves to be very talented with this movie, Ready or Not, and Abigail. But there's also a part of me that feels very detached from this movie, like, this isn't my Scream. It's close, and I think it's good. It's a solid, entertaining horror film. It's just missing something. Even though I don't like how it was done, I get killing Dewey, and I'm not big on the third act and the killer reveals. For a movie that was so good at changing things up in the first 2 acts, the finale feels kind of like rinse and repeat. I like it, but I don't love it. Watching it for this video was the first time I'd seen it since the theater, and I feel about the same as I did back then. It surprised me with the quality because it could have been way worse. It's a solid movie, just one that I have several issues with. But this return to Scream did well in the box office, bringing in $139 million on just a $24 million budget. And just 2 weeks after it released, they would announce another sequel. And the very next year, bring us Scream 6.
Are you telling me that I'm caught in the middle of fan-fucking fiction?
Scream 6 would continue to have the same writers and directors as the 5th installment, but there would be some significant changes that happen here. The biggest of which is that this would be the first Scream movie that would not feature Neve Campbell playing Sidney. And this is kind of what began a divide of sorts in the fan community for this series, because with Scream 5, we do the legacy sequel thing, introducing Sam as the new main character and having Sidney be more of a supporting role. Not only do they continue that into Scream 6, but they go even farther with it. And although the original plan was to have Sidney in the movie, the offer to Neve Campbell for her role as far as compensation and screen time was concerned was not what she felt equated to her value to the franchise. Other than the Ghostface image itself, Neve Campbell had been the face of the Scream franchise since 1996, so I do feel like she has some justification here in asking for more money, especially if she's going to be knocked back into a supporting role. Neve Campbell stated, "As a woman, I had to work extremely hard in my career to establish my value, especially when it comes to Scream. I felt the offer that was presented to me did not equate this value that I have brought to the franchise. It's been a very difficult decision for me to move on. To all my Scream fans, I love you. You've always been so incredibly supportive to me. I'm forever grateful to you and what this franchise has given me over the past 25 years. I think it's really important for us to be valued and to fight for that value." Many other people that had previously been involved with the franchise, actors and people behind the scenes alike, including Kevin Williamson, the writer of the original, spoke out and supported Neve Campbell for standing up for herself and asking for more compensation. But ultimately, they could not come to an agreement behind the scenes, and the creators parted ways with Neve and pressed forward on a Scream movie that would not feature her character. Sidney would only be mentioned in a couple lines of dialogue, but it is a difficult adjustment. I'm just glad they didn't kill her off screen, as so many other movies have done to their characters. And once again, I do think Melissa Barrera is strong enough to carry a movie on her own as a lead character, and I don't think fans should pit these actresses against one another. These decisions are made by people in offices somewhere, corporate entities that don't have anything to do with the actual creators or actors of the film. Most of the time, anyway. But it is unfortunate that they couldn't come to an agreement on Neve Campbell's salary and figure out some kind of way to have her presence in the movie, because it is surely missed. With Sidney not appearing and Dewey gone, that just leaves Gale, who does return in this movie in a small supporting role, but the fact that she's in the movie at all gives Courtney Cox the title of being the only actor and character to appear in all 6 movies, so round of applause. My favorite thing about Scream 6 is the opening scene. It may be all downhill after that, but the opening got me really excited when I first saw it. The movie takes place in New York City, which is a very cool new setting for the franchise, and we start with a girl played by Samara Weaving waiting for her date to show up. He calls her with a normal voice at first and leads her outside to meet him out in an alleyway. That was definitely her first mistake, because our first kill happens right then and there. But then something happens. Ghostface takes off his mask, and we see him plain as day, and then we follow him back to his apartment. And when I first saw this, I thought, holy shit, what a brilliant way to subvert expectations and do something different with this franchise. Revealing Ghostface right away would give you as the audience a completely different experience while watching these movies. What if we followed and understood him? We attached and identified with him as a character in some way. What if we followed him around around as the main character? Or what if we saw the killings from his perspective? We actually get to see Ghostface on the phone. Sure, it removes the murder mystery aspect, but since this is the 6th film in the franchise, and you aren't going to have Sidney as a character anyway, what better time to try to do something different and creative? I was on board with this idea 100% and couldn't wait to see where they took it. I couldn't wait to see what fun ideas revealing the established killer right away could have meant on this franchise, and, oh, never mind. Yeah, because the real killer of the movie kills this one that we were following right away. Okay, so scrap that idea, I guess, but then, why was this Ghostface killer killed? Oh, maybe this is a Ghostface that kills other Ghostface, a killer targeting other killers. Now that would be a really fun and interesting new direction, and I also would be on board with this idea, and no, don't get your hopes up, that's not it at all. Nope, the first killer was only taken out because the real killer of the movie wants Samantha for himself. Okay, I guess. Immediately, 2 incredibly fresh and original takes on the series are done away with so that we can return to the formula that we've seen before and have the killer motivation be revenge. You can't really get more cliche and more overdone than that at this point. Even the lame excuse for the murders in Scream 5 was at least motivated by something, let's say, more unique. The motivations in this movie are just so standard and disappointing. Spoilers here again, obviously, but this film has 3 main killers in total, so I guess that's something different. We have Wayne and his children, Quinn and Ethan, father and siblings of Richie from Scream 5. It's a family affair. You can pretty much look at the themes of this movie as family versus family. You have Richie's family coming back for revenge against Sam and Tara, as well as Sam and Tara's pseudo-family, which includes Chad and Mindy. But not only do I think the revenge plot is a little bit too standard of a motivation at this point, but it also felt like the structure of this movie was leading us towards a very different end result. I'll talk about it more as we get to the end, but the finale of this movie to me is the most disappointing killer reveal in any Scream movie. So yes, sisters Sam and Tara return as our leads in the film. Mindy and Chad are also back, as well now with romantic tension brewing between Tara and Chad. Quinn is Sam's roommate and Ethan is Chad's roommate, allowing them to get close to their targets and constantly monitoring them as well. New characters are here like Anika, who is totally disposable, and I couldn't tell you a damn thing about her other than the fact that she's Mindy's girlfriend, and she's pretty much the only character that we actually get to see die. Well, I guess there's also Sam's therapist too, but he was in like 4 minutes of screen time prior. And also Gail's new boyfriend, who I'm not even sure if we learn his name or not, and dies in the background of the same scene that he's introduced. But that's basically it. Oh, and also Sam has a secret new boyfriend named Danny that lives across from them. He's pretty much the red herring of the movie and doesn't do much. But then we also have the return of Kirby, which is really cool. Now truly confirmed to have survived the events of Scream 4, and she's working as an FBI agent. Where seeing that, I had the same reaction that Gail did. Isn't she too young for that? Well, no, because this movie takes place 12 years after Scream 4, and the character of Kirby is now 30 years old, which makes me feel really old, but also kudos to Hayden Panettiere, because she really doesn't look all that much older during all this time. I don't feel Scream 6 really has a specific movie example that it references all the way through like the previous sequels have, with sequels, trilogies, requels, what have you. Our main scene discussion about it that we have here just calls it a franchise movie, when you've had too many sequels and now all that matters is the IP, and thus any character can die at this point because they only care about the brand, which is very accurate actually, but also a moot point because this movie refuses to commit to any of the deaths of the established characters, more so than any Scream movie of the past. But before I go ranting and raving, there is another thing about this movie that I like, and it's the depiction of social media, harassment, and deception. After the events of Scream 5, people have taken to social media to defend Richie and Amber and claim that Sam was actually the one that orchestrated all of the murders, assuming Richie and Amber are innocent. They link Sam to her father Billy and basically condemn her to be no better than he was. People film her out of context, putting videos online of her getting understandably upset about something and post it for the world to see and ridicule. She doesn't seem to have any privacy, and she's become an unwanting internet celebrity. And that is very accurate of how things are nowadays and how this bullying and harassment online is nonstop, and usually from people that know nothing about the situation that they're talking about, and they just become keyboard warriors wanting to hate on somebody. Sam's only kill was in self-defense, and she's been painted as this monster. You do legitimately feel bad for her because of this, and she's also struggling to maintain protection over Tara, who is now getting older herself and wanting to make her own decisions, good or bad, without Sam looking over her shoulder constantly. So all that stuff I think is really good for both of these characters. There's an attack scene that happens early on when Ghostface comes after Sam and Tara on the city streets. Once again, I have to emphasize how difficult these masks are to wear, so attacking somebody at night in the middle of the city while wearing this is a bold decision. You gotta have like 20/20 vision in there. I'm also not sure if he was willing to kill them right here, because it definitely seems like he's trying to, but he was pretty close to being successful here. And if the goal was just to kill them without any kind of announcement to who they are, I mean, Quinn, Sam's roommate, why doesn't she just kill Sam in her sleep or unlock the door in the middle of the night and let Wayne in and have him do it then and there? I mean, if you want to guarantee the revenge and guarantee the kill, it's pretty much right there for the taking, but then we wouldn't have a movie. Also, the other big controversy about this scene is that Ghostface grabs a shotgun from the store clerk and actually uses it. People did not like seeing Ghostface with a gun, but honestly, I didn't have an issue with it. Hell, Ghostface has always used a gun. It's just usually after the reveal happens when they take the mask off. But still, that's Ghostface with a gun. Yes, the knife is classic, and as Chucky says, a true classic never goes out of style, and I think the knife should be used more often than the guns, but once in a blue moon, I don't mind if Ghostface busts a cap.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
They do manage to escape this scenario, and once Kirby is introduced into the film, the investigation finds out that the killer has been leaving masks behind of the previous Ghostface killers, starting with the most recent, and each subsequent killing leaving behind another mask going further down the line, basically leading us towards the masks of Billy and Stu. This was another element of the movie that got me excited at first, but ultimately was another letdown. You want to talk about the opportunity to officially bring Stu back. This felt like it could have been the moment, leaving clues that backtrack the franchise, bringing us back to the original Ghostface mask, the mask worn by the original killer, Stu. They reference Stu twice in this movie, once by having a poster board of all of the Ghostface killers and seem to confirm that he's dead there, but then later there's a scene where they show the TV that fell on him, and Mindy and Kirby are having a discussion on if they believe that Stu is actually dead. Well, how can there possibly be an if, unless his body was never accounted for? And that's the confusing part. Where is this if coming from? He's either dead, and they have buried or cremated his body, or he's not dead, and he's been missing the entire time. There's really no other alternative. So if Stu really died, what does that even mean? I guess we might find out in the next one, who knows. But even with all the clues and references that lead back to Scream 1, no, Stu is nowhere to be found in this movie. I didn't really think he would, but the thing that bothers me about it is that this movie consistently sets up ideas that are far more interesting than what we actually get. It's like they wanted to present the potential of taking a risk, but then were too scared to follow through with it. If you're going to make your mark on a new era of Scream without Wes Craven, without Neve Campbell, then let's shake things up. Make the Jason Goes to Hell of the Scream franchise. As much as I hate that movie, I do appreciate it swinging for the fences. I know that Scream is only on part 6, but it's still been 17 years since the original. May as well go all out with it. Take a bold swing. But they don't. They just give you the potential of something that could have been new, creative, different, and interesting, but then ultimately follow through with the same formula yet again. And because of that, it feels more forgettable than any of the others. They then fake Quinn's death in the apartment to get her off the suspect list and free her up to do some of the killings later on, and the scene where they have to escape Sam's apartment into Danny's by having them cross a ladder in between the windows is a pretty well done suspenseful scene, and Anika being the most disposable character of the group does not make the trip. As far as Gale goes in this movie, it's mentioned that she went back on her word to not write a book about the events of Scream 5, so she's not looking too favorable to Sam and Tara right now. But she does turn up to help, does some investigating of her own off-screen, but she is the one that finds Ghostface's lair. Yeah, Ghostface has a lair in this one. And it's this abandoned theater that looks like a shrine to the Scream murders and the Stab movie franchise. It's Richie's entire collection, many items which should have been in police evidence rooms, but I guess his dad has very unsuspiciously pulled a lot of strings for him in order to get the items here. There's a scene where Ghostface attacks Gale and kills her boyfriend, which it's only been a year since Dewey died. I mean, I get that they were divorced, but still, I mean, kind of awkward. Also, he has no character whatsoever. He's killed off in like 30 seconds, so there's really no point to him being here other than to have somebody killed off that isn't a main character. But this is the first phone call scene that Gale has with a Ghostface, so that is cool to see. Even though she grabs a gun, Gale is stabbed a couple of times, and it seems like this could be it for her, until Sam shows up and Ghostface escapes. They do not kill Gale here, and after killing Dewey in Part 5, I honestly thought that they would have, because this would sever the ties to the original cast completely and leave the franchise open to definitively follow Sam. But no, Gale stays alive yet again. Now, them not committing to killing Gale was fine. I didn't want her to die, but I would have accepted it if they did. I think my main issue comes with repeating this process 3 more times in this movie. There's a subway scene where Mindy gets separated from the group for a bit, and she's in a massive crowd of people wearing Halloween costumes, some of which are Ghostface. There's some really good tension and build-up here that I like, and eventually she's stabbed by one of the Ghostface. It reminded me of Scream 2 in a way where a character is murdered while being in a large crowd where everyone is too preoccupied to notice. Also, she doesn't die, and she survives to the end of the movie. Okay, fine. But then Chad is grabbed by 2 Ghostface at once and stabbed multiple times by each of them. This man survives multiple stabbings in Scream 5 somehow, and he's just here and fine in this movie, doesn't even have a limp, but my suspension of disbelief is put to the limit when he survives getting stabbed at least 4 times by each of them on both sides of his body and left for dead. Even if no vitals were hit, he was bleeding out for the entire 3rd act of the movie. He should be dead. And even further than that, they have a scene where Kirby is shot and then she's stabbed once again in the gut in the same spot that she was stabbed in Scream 4, but she also survives. Look, you can have a fake out death in a movie, that's fine, but 4 of them in a row? That's just not allowed. It feels like they were afraid to commit to any deaths in this movie at all. And the only people picked off are side characters that we never cared about in the first place. Out of these 4 characters, you couldn't have just picked one to go all the way with. Of all of them, I think Chad should have definitely been deader than dead here. Kirby surviving is kind of standard 3rd act Scream stuff, so whatever, I can buy it. But either Gale or Mindy were well-primed targets to be taken out in this film, and they just decided to not go all the way with it. Or maybe they could have subverted expectations in a different way. Have Gale kill the Ghostface that attacks her, who turns out to be Quinn. It would have been a real what the fuck moment since they all thought Quinn was already dead at this point. I don't know, just do something different instead. It constantly gets you primed for a big kill scene and then there's no kill. And that's what I feel this whole movie is to some degree. It's great setup with little to no payoff. Anyway, the finale of the movie takes place in the Ghostface lair, where Wayne reveals himself to be Richie's father, in his plot for revenge involving his other 2 children, and his plan to blame Sam for it all when it's said and done. Sam and Tara fight back, eventually getting the upper hand with some not-so-subtle imagery of Sam letting Tara go so that she can handle one of them on her own. Tara stabs Ethan, Sam then kills Quinn by shooting her in the face, and then it's just Sam and Wayne face to face. But instead of shooting Sam with a loaded gun that he has in his hand, he decides instead to just run towards her. Her gun was empty at this point, by the way, so he's just charging at her with a fully loaded gun in his hand instead of firing, and why, your guess is as good as mine. It leads to Sam eventually putting on her father's Ghostface costume, and eventually stabbing the shit out of Wayne. I guess I forgot to mention that yes, in this movie, Sam still does see visions of Billy, but it's not quite as prominent here as it was in Scream 5, and it's a little bit more subtle. The way I take it is that she understands her history as a part of her, and that she can access that part of her father within her, but she would never be a straight-up killer like he was. She does kill, but only in defense of her and her family that she's created. And this was another situation that called for it. Ethan has one last moment to attack, and Kirby drops the television that killed Stu onto him. Or did it kill Stu? We'll never know. It's no shocker that I'm not really a big fan of Scream 6, and I found this movie to be ultimately disappointing. But that's only because I felt like it had so much potential, and then it lost the plot. There were some things about it that I liked, including the commentary on social media perception of somebody who's gone through some tragic experience, and it also had some genuinely suspenseful scenes, like the ladder sequence as well as the subway scene. I like the setting of a big city as part of the Scream universe, although I don't think it was utilized the best it could have been. It's like every time this movie got me excited for something, it then took it away. A new motive for the killers, or an early killer reveal reshaping the way that we see the Scream films, just didn't happen. Refusing to commit to any character deaths beyond the most obvious throwaway characters, having the great mystery of evidence left behind of previous killers only to give us the 3 lamest killers in the entire franchise thus far. But I will say, as many issues as I have with it, it's not as bad as some entries in other horror franchises. I still think Scream as a whole is overall pretty consistent in its franchise. And although I think this movie is mid-tier, I don't think it hits the low lows as maybe Nightmare on Elm Street or the Friday the 13th franchise did. But despite Scream 6 being divisive for fans, it also performed very well at the box office. So, talks for a 7th installment happened right away. But what would happen next was nothing short of a major disaster.
Whatever happened last time, expect the opposite.
Now, when it comes to the future of the Scream franchise, it doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon, but there is also a lot of tension concerning any further continuation, so let's just rip the band-aid right off and talk about it. In the most abridged explanation that I can give you as somebody that just researches on the internet, the original plan for Scream 7 included the continuation of the Sam and Tara story as the lead characters, with both Bentalini Olpin and Gillette returning to direct the film, with many assuming that it would be the conclusion of the Sam and Tara trilogy. But then a domino effect of terrible events began to happen, and it's unlikely that we will ever hear the full true story behind the scenes, but first, the directors decided to leave the project, supposedly due to scheduling conflicts working on their next film, Abigail, of which Melissa Barrera was also the lead actor in that film. It's a pretty good little vampire flick. I would definitely recommend it. It's a fun time. The studio searched for a new director and landed on Christopher Landon. He stepped in to direct the project, and he had previously made the 2 Happy Death Day movies that had some good success. Then, during the pre-production of Scream 7, there was a huge writer's strike that happened in 2023 that massively slowed down the creative process and momentarily put a halt on anything Scream related. Things were at a bit of a standstill for a while. But then we have the big moment, and the most controversial of all. Towards the end of 2023, it was revealed that Melissa Barrera had been fired by the studio and would no longer appear in Scream 7. A huge what the fuck moment, but even worse is when you consider the reasons for this. Now, I don't talk politics on this channel. I'm not a super knowledgeable guy when it comes to this, but this is a very relevant topic to this specific situation. During this time, the war between Israel and Palestine was ramping up to levels that are completely tragic and heartbreaking to hear and see, and at this time, every day, a new tragic event was on the news, and many people began speaking out on their opinions of the situation, to which they have every right to do. Melissa took to social media in support and defense of Palestine, and said and shared various posts that said things along the lines of, "I hope this Christmas feels weird. I hope you can't ignore the fact that you're celebrating the birth of a child who was persecuted and targeted and his parents forced to flee to Egypt, while right now millions of Palestinians from that exact part of the world are being persecuted and targeted and forced to flee their homes while they are indiscriminately and relentlessly bombed. As we wake up to what is and has been happening in Gaza and see it for what it is very important to also understand, just like all Palestinians are not Hamas, all Jewish people are not the Israeli government." Her negative critiques of the Israel government and the war was somehow interpreted by Spyglass Media and the studios to be anti-Semitic, as in racist or prejudiced against Jewish people in general. And for that, they fired her. Now, regardless of where you stand on these political issues at hand, I don't see how anything she said could actually be found to be evidence of anti-Semitism. And even so, it's her freedom and right to have whatever opinion she wants to have and be able to express it. It was a very sensitive time and topic, and lots of people were being hurt, and she does have a platform to share her views and opinions. I understand that a corporation is allowed to fire you based on your online activity. Actors are not the only ones that need to be careful about this. It's true for most anybody. But I don't think there's anything she did that could be founded as being big enough of an issue to be fired, especially for the reasons they said. Many actors have done much worse and still remained employed and allowed to be the lead in big budget films. At the end of the day, it just seems like she was standing up for what her beliefs were and trying to bring awareness that we may not be getting the full story based upon what some media outlets have been showing at the time. And how the studio just immediately fired her and expected fans to be on board with them, that is just an insane take. If she had done something truly horrendous, then maybe, but that wasn't the case. She shared and expressed some social media posts rallying against war and genocide. Even if the studio did have an issue with this, maybe talk to her on the side or have like a PR course or something. Not that I think they needed to do that either, but just immediately jumping to fire her, you gotta be kidding. And look, we may never know all of the behind-the-scenes details, maybe there's more to the story, but it seems like a studio got scared and they wanted to try to protect their own asses and finances as well, and so they decided to cut Melissa off without a second thought. I do not support her firing, and I do think it was unjust. And immediately after that, it was announced that Jenna Ortega would also be dropping out of the project. She wasn't fired like Melissa was, but most people seem to assume it was her sticking by Melissa's side, and figuring if they don't want Melissa for the movie, then she's not coming back either. Later, it was mentioned it was due to scheduling conflicts with Wednesday Season 2, but the term scheduling conflict seems to be the most go-to excuse every time something doesn't work out while making movies behind the scenes. It's a quick, easy way to kind of skirt the real issues under the rug. I'm sure there's many things happening simultaneously that we don't understand, and maybe Melissa's firing was just the catalyst to let Jenna feel like she's okay with dropping out now, but whatever the case, now both of the lead characters are no longer in the film, leading, of course, to a massive fan backlash. And I also feel incredibly bad for Christopher Landon. He considered getting the job to direct a Scream movie a dream come true, and then all of it crumbled to pieces around him. A lot of people decided to blame him for the firing of Melissa and assumed since he was the director, he could have prevented it or he was the one that made it happen. But this was all the studio. It was producers and financiers. He tweeted that he had left the project weeks prior, that the entire thing had turned into a nightmare for him, and that he had received numerous death threats, harassment, and a barrage of negative comments from people wanting to find somebody to point the finger at and blame specifically. I can understand being upset and frustrated, but it seems like Christopher Landon didn't have anything to do with this, and it was completely out of his control. And to have your dreams of directing a Scream movie taken away from you, as well as have half the fan base come at you and people send you death threats, I'm sure that was an extremely painful experience for him, and I don't wish that upon anybody. So now the two main actors were gone, one of them with an extremely controversial reason, and the director was out too. Part of me really wonders what Wes Craven's input would have been if he was here making these movies still. I just feel like things would have gone differently if he was. And maybe this was all a sign to finally let Scream go. Leave it the horror series that somehow managed to avoid having a truly terrible film in its run, and any remakes. It's an outlier in the slasher genre, and it'll always have its place in our hearts. But no.
Hello, I like money.
Instead, the studio went for the ultimate Hail Mary, and this is what truly has caused a massive split in the fandom, to the point where it's almost hard to talk about Scream online at all, because from this point forward there will always be animosity and hatred back and forth. Basically, they went running back to Neve Campbell, and now they offered her all the money she wanted, as well as a leading part again.
What inspired you to build a second Krusty Krab right next door to the original?
Money!
Then in the spring of 2024, the new director of Scream 7 was announced, and It's Kevin Williamson. Yeah, not only did they scramble to bring back the original star, but they also went ahead and got the man that started all of this. The writer of the original Scream films will now be stepping up into the director's chair for the very first time. And oh, the mixed feelings this brings. I understand both sides here. On the one hand, this is clearly a studio that is trying to throw as much fan service in front of our eyes as possible to make us forget the unjust firing of Melissa and the crap that Christopher Landon had to endure without even getting to make his movie. But on the other hand, Neve Campbell and Kevin Williamson had nothing to do with the firing or the controversy, and like anybody else looking for a job and for work, of course they would take the opportunity to work together again on a project that they're both interested in. And hey, to get a paycheck and pay their bills. I guess then the argument would be, should they outright refuse to work for a studio that did what it did to Melissa? Which is fair, but also, would any other movie studio actually be different? And my answer to that is probably no. I don't think it would really matter where you go or who the financiers are. They all do the same shady shit behind the scenes all the time, and they're willing to fire anybody to protect their own interests. But I also get the other side of it and wanting to stand with Melissa, and like most things in life, it's very complicated with a lot of moving parts. So now you have people that are deeply supportive of Melissa and they actively want Scream 7 to fail and they want to watch the studio burn to the ground. And then you have the other side that are excited to see the return of Neve and Sydney and feel like she deserves this since she was treated extremely unfairly when it came to Scream 6. And they also want to see Kevin be able to take the reins as director after all these years that he did writing for the franchise and see what he can bring to the table. So you can see how this is just a mess from start to finish. I do hate what happened to Melissa, and I hate how the original Scream 7 was annihilated piece by piece. But also, as a longtime Scream fan, of course I want to see what Kevin can cook up, and of course I want to see Neve Campbell back. But the Scream 7 stuff gets even wackier than this, because in the wake of the news that Neve Campbell would be returning, there's also been announcement after announcement after announcement of returning cast members, but a lot of them are actors who have literally died in the previous movies. Scott Foley, who played Roman in Scream 3, where he was shot in the head, is coming back for Scream 7. Okay. Then you have David Arquette coming back as Dewey, who was gutted and bled out in Scream 5. And then you have the big one. Matthew Lillard literally confirmed to now be coming back as Stu Macher. What the fuck is going on?
All I can tell you is that he's in Scream 7. That's all I can say.
We don't know much of the story details about Scream 7 as it's being kept under wraps. We know it will focus on Sydney and her family, as we saw that she has kids in Scream 5, but we never saw them, and as well she's married and has a husband. So we'll get to explore that avenue of her character in this movie, but what about all the dead characters? Well, there's a number of theories. One is that they will simply be in flashbacks and nothing more. We also do have some precedents of characters seeing visions of dead characters, like Sam seeing Billy, though it would be odd to see Sydney all of a sudden having these same moments all this time later. But my favorite theory, which seems to be not what they're going with, but man, it would have been cool, is to take a new Nightmare approach to the story and have all of the Scream actors playing themselves in the real world, as in a real-life Ghostface killer begins to stalk and attack the actors from Scream. A different take on the meta-style storytelling than Scream's done so far, and it also wouldn't break or change anything that happened in Scream 5 or 6, since this would take place in our real world and be a standalone film. But the more little tidbits of information that we get, the less likely that theory seems to be true. If nothing else, this may finally be the time, and for God's sakes, with all the teases and previous opportunities all botched up to this point, to just bring Stu Macher back. Sure, you have to explain where he's been the last 30 years, but with everything coming together like this, if they don't finally and officially bring him back here, then it's literally never happening. Announcing Matthew Lillard without it being a twist is also strange, because that would have been a great surprise in the movie, so I don't know how they're going to approach it. but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. As of right now, the recording of this video, Scream 7 doesn't have a trailer out yet, but is scheduled to release on February 27th, 2026, which is also the same day that Resident Evil 9 comes out. So it could turn out to be a great day, or a massively disappointing one. For right now, all I can say is only time will tell. Now it's time to give my rankings of the top 10 favorite kills in the Scream franchise, but I guess for right now I have to keep Stu's death at an honorable mention, because who knows. At my number 10, I'm going to put Jason from the beginning of Scream 6, my favorite part of the movie, with revealing a Ghostface right away, and then having them get killed by another Ghostface. No matter how the rest of the movie turned out, this opening scene and premise got me extremely excited, and I thought it was a great opening twist. For number 9, I'm going to go with Charlie in Scream 4. Reason being is just how unceremonious it is. You can tell that he was really doing all the grunt work for Jill and cared about her a lot, and as soon as his usefulness ran out, she just stabs the shit out of him and goes about her business. Damn. At number 8, it's going to be Sam killing Richie from Scream 5. He definitely deserved it, and yeah, it was cathartic as hell to see her just stab him over and over, tapping into the darker part of her bloodline and finishing it off with a slit to the throat. Number 7 is also going to be from Scream 5 with Amber. I like deaths that have multiple pieces to it. See, first she gets all burned up, then her face is melting off, and then she finally gets shot. At number 6, I have Olivia from Scream 4, a very forgettable character, sure, but I love the scene where she gets killed, how Ghostface calls Kirby expecting to have a scene with her, only for him to actually be across the street killing Olivia at the same time, and leaving one of the goriest messes behind of the entire franchise. At number 5, I'm going to go with Liv from Scream 5, another forgettable character, but the reveal of Amber just taking out a gun and shooting her point blank in the face is just the kind of sick, dark humor that I enjoy. For number 4, I have to go with Billy from the original. It's overdone now, sure, but at the time, having Sidney stab him and then when he gets up again, popping him in the head and saying, "Not in my movie," classic, and part of what cements the original Scream as an all-time great. For number 3, I'm going to have to go with Tatum's death, another iconic one where she tries to escape via the doggy door in the garage door, but then just gets crushed, dangling as a corpse for the rest of the final act. At number 2 is Maureen from Scream 2. There's just something incredibly haunting about somebody who is really getting murdered during this insane celebration of a slasher movie, and nobody noticing or believing her or paying any attention to any of the true tragedy that is happening in front of them, too enthralled by the fake tragedy on the screen. And finally, at number 1, this is not any surprise, the best scene from almost any horror movie ever, Casey Becker, the opening kill of the original Scream. The tension, the suspense, the reveals, the acting, the setting, everything is perfect, and it remains, to me, the definitive Scream kill, and the kill in which all others will forever be measured against. And now that we are winding down towards the end of the video, it is time to do my personal subjective ranking of all the Scream films. I'm sure everybody will have a different list and a different criteria of where they rank the Scream franchise. This is just my version, and I figure if you made it this far in the video anyway, you're at least, tolerant in my opinion, so we'll see how it goes. Here is my ranking, guys. Of all 6 Scream films, at number 6, I am going to put Scream 6. But I don't think this is a bad movie. As I've said many times throughout this entire video, I think Scream is one of the rare horror franchises where there's not just an outright abysmal film in the franchise. I think all of the films are enjoyable and entertaining to different degrees. They all have really good actors and they have good kill scenes, good horror sequences. All of them are solid enough. Just 6 was the most disappointing for me when I went to go see it. I think a lot of that too has to do with I just wanted more from it. I saw more potential in where it could go, but then it kind of fell back on the same standard stuff, and it also just had this refusal to commit to any of its kill scenes. None of the characters that die in this movie matter at all, and it just had so many fake out deaths, and you can do a fake out death here or there, but this one did it like 3 or 4 times, and by that point, my suspension of disbelief is just automatically destroyed. I also thought Scream 6 had the lamest killers of the entire franchise when you could have done so much more with it. And that's the thing that is the ultimate threadline bummer of this movie for me, is that I kept seeing potential. There was so much potential in what they could have done with the killers, what they could have done with the story, what they could have done with the kills themselves, what they could have done with having a Scream movie take place in New York City. There's so many different options and different routes they could have traveled, but ultimately it just kind of fell flat for me. And it's an okay movie. I enjoy it enough. Just definitely my least favorite of the franchise. In the number 5 spot, I do unfortunately have to put Scream 3. This one's a little bit difficult because I understand all of the behind the scenes drama that went into it and how it had to be heavily cut down from what it was before. Old different story beats and bringing Stu back had to be scrapped, and then they kind of scrambled to put together a new script and make a new killer and a new story, while at the same time having to heavily censor themselves and up the humor and all of that stuff from behind the scenes. I understand, but at the same time, I can't judge a movie on what it could have been. I really have to look at it objectively from what the movie is, what we ultimately got. And what we got, although there are aspects of it that I really like. I like it happening on a movie set. I love movies that are about making movies. The humor doesn't really work for me, and adding in this entire story point about Sydney's mom going to Hollywood, trying to be an actor, and then connecting it to the meta sensibilities of Scream and being about movies. Like, as much as I love the movie taking place on a movie set, you know, tying it all in that way, and then having Sydney's half-brother just so happen to have landed the job of directing Stab 3. There are just way too many coincidental things that happen here that, again, just kind of ruin my suspension of disbelief. For a long time, this was the last Scream movie, and I accepted it as the conclusion of a trilogy. Not as good as the first two, but you know, it's enjoyable enough just as a movie, just not one of my favorites. Next at number 4 is going to be Scream 5. This was rebooting the franchise, doing the requel parody, and adding in new main characters while also bringing the legacy characters back. This is the introduction of Sam and Tara that are the new protagonists that would take over Scream, and I think they all did a good job. I think it does make sense for this movie to come out at the time it did, you know, in the wake of Halloween 2018 and some of these other legacy sequel style movies that were happening at the time. I love the twist of the beginning where the opening kill scene doesn't end in a kill and Tara actually survives. I thought that was a cool little unique spin to throw on it. But the things that bum me out about this one are how they handled Dewey and Gale and having them break up, and Dewey is just this, you know, loner drunk living in a trailer, drinking himself to death, and then goes out the way that he goes out. Just a real bummer all around. Once again, if you're gonna kill Dewey off, that's okay. You know, I understand we're at Scream 5. We got to start killing off some of these major characters, but I just didn't like, you know, the breaking down of his character, what they did to him, and then ultimately how he ends up. And him and Gale only have about 1 minute of screen time the entire movie, and I understand, too, the behind-the-scenes aspects of David Arquette and Courtney Cox really divorcing, so it does parallel that, and I understand, but at the same time, Dewey and Gale are fictional characters, so we could have done something a little different with them. And also with Scream 5, I think the killers are just okay. They're not the worst, they're not the best, they're just somewhere in the middle. But on to the top 3, and if you would have asked me this before I started making this video, I thought in my mind I had my top 2 locked down. But after rewatching all of these movies for this video, it has changed. So what was originally my number 2 is now my number 3, and that is Scream 2. Scream 2 seems to get a lot of hate online, and I'm not really sure why, but I guess it's also a nostalgia bias because I did grow up with this movie. Like, Scream 2 was readily available for me when I was younger, and I watched it dozens and dozens of times, and I really like it as a continuation of the first. The only thing about Scream 2 I don't really like is the killer reveal. You know, I do think that Mickey is just kind of there throughout the course of the movie, and okay, having Billy's mom as the second killer, you know, that works fine enough. It could have been better, but it is what it is. But everything else about the movie I think is great. I love the college campus setting. I like Randy's character in this movie, and I don't mind that he gets killed off. I think it makes sense, but they also incorporate him well enough that he's a major player in the film. I do like the building of the relationship between Dewey and Gale. I think actually Scream 2 is the best Dewey and Gale dynamic of the entire franchise. I like Sydney just being constantly on edge because of everything that happened in the first. I think she's the most believable of a survivor as, compared to most of the final girls in slasher films. And I really do like the opening kill. I like this idea of everyone celebrating this carnage on screen, so much so that they're blinded to the real life horror happening in front of them. And there's a lot of things about Scream 2 that I think are done very, very well. I think there's a lot of good suspense, a good Ghostface on the phone scene with Sarah Michelle Gellar, which still always throws me off because I'm so used to seeing her as Buffy. So every time she gets killed in a horror movie, it's so weird for me. You know, she should be doing spin kicks and kicking the shit out of them all. But, it is what it is. Everything I like about Scream 2 is, except for the killer reveal. That's really the only thing that brings it down for me. But besides that, I think it's a great horror movie and a really good sequel. But at my number 2 now is actually going to be Scream 4. Rewatching this film now, it's been a little while since I've seen it. I couldn't believe how much I loved this movie in comparison to how I thought about it in my mind. Like, originally I was thinking it was going to be, you already know what number 1 is, obviously, but it was going to be Scream, Scream 2, Scream 4, but that has flip-flopped. And I think one of the major reasons is because of how much better I think the killer portrayal in Scream 4 is. I think this is the best Scream sequel, how it calls back to the original. It does parody remakes, and how the killer is kind of going through and remaking the original Scream I thought was really creative. I do love the new cast of characters. It's a shame they all get killed off except for Kirby, but I love their interactions. Jill, Kirby, Charlie, like all of these characters, I really love all of their interactions together, and I kind of like this younger cast better than the younger cast of Scream 5. Not that the Scream 5 cast is bad, but there's something about the cast, the younger cast of Scream 4, I think is integrated so well alongside the original cast, and it just blends together in a near perfect way. I love the idea of Jill as the killer just wanting this social media attention and to have online fame and not really caring about anything else, other than being in the spotlight. And I think it's an interesting look at how a lot of people that are online are. You look at influencers and people that are more famous, and a lot of the times they are just like horribly nasty people that will just do anything for views and clicks, without caring about who they hurt in the process, and this is just like the next step further than that. I really enjoy this movie. I like it a lot, and it is Wes Craven's last film, and I think although it's not his best movie, I think it's a pretty damn good film to go out on, and rest in peace to the legend. But as no surprise to anybody, I really couldn't imagine anybody making a Scream ranking list and not putting the original Scream at number 1. I mean, I'm sure there's like 3 people out there that would change it up, but I think most people would agree that Scream is one of the best horror movies ever made. I mean, I really do think so. There are some people that call it overrated, but I think Scream cemented itself so much in horror history and pop culture, and I really do honestly think it is one of the best slasher movies to ever be created. So many copycats and imitators have come in its wake. It introduces us into this world with probably the best opening scene of any movie ever. I mean, I could think of like maybe on one hand movies with opening sequences that compare or could be better than Scream, but Scream is up there so high, and I don't think the tension, the phone call scenes, the opening scenes have ever reached the highs of the original, and there's a reason for that. It's like, it came out at a perfect time, a perfect place in history. It was a perfect storm of events that you just can't really recreate and replicate. We can make more Scream movies, but we'll never be able to redo the impact of that opening scene in the original Scream. And then the movie goes on and still manages to be great, introducing us to Sydney, Dewey, Gale, Billy, Stu, all of these iconic characters that 30 years later we're still talking about and we still want to see again. And that is a huge testament, especially to the horror genre, where so many slasher movies constantly change characters film to film. Scream has given us characters that we want to see where they are now. We want to see their journey. We want to see them grow up and survive and, the next stage of development for them. We want to see all of that. And without the original Scream giving us these characters to begin with, the collaboration between Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven and the great cast that it was, we wouldn't have the same outlook on Scream as we have today. So yes, absolutely, no question in my mind whatsoever. The original, #1 forever.
Okay. Now it's time to find out who you really are. I don't understand. I don't understand. You're me?
Surprise, Ryan. Of course it's you. It's always been you. Who else could it have been? You think there's other people around? You're the only one here. You've always been the only one here. You're just afraid to face your truth, and that is why I was manifested. That is what I am here to bring you.
No, what do you mean?
You keep ignoring what you truly desire. You keep ignoring your pleasure, sir.
What do I desire?
All this time. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, I only want to talk about franchises that mean something to me. Oh, I can't watch those movies. They're too shitty. Don't you realize you've been watching shitty movies your entire life? What makes this any different?
I don't desire any of this. I sit home and I make long-winded YouTube videos that some people like and some don't. I don't know, it's just a thing.
You can watch Freddy's Dead, you can watch Jason Goes to Hell, you can watch all the Leprechaun movies, but for some reason, you're too scared to do what you know you want to.
How can this be real?
You are a psycho, Ryan. All of this has been one great delusion.
I don't understand.
Does any of it make any sense at all?
What's going on? What's going on?
Is there any continuity even with your own timeline?
I don't remember. I remember dressing like a leprechaun and getting tied up or something. It all makes sense. There's continuity. There's just one timeline, right? There's just one timeline?
And yet you bitch and moan and complain about the timeline of others. You are a hypocrite, and that is why it is time for you to be truly punished.
No! 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 No!
I offered this to you once before. You accepted. You cannot go back on the deal anymore. Take it. It is time. No tears, Ryan. It's a waste of good suffering.
No. Please, don't make me do it. Don't make me do it.
I have such sights to show you. The audience awaits it. And if you cheat them, I'll tear your soul apart.